Pay for us patrol?
We're 100% snafu.
I'm the Night Rider!
In the desolate Australian outback, where the law is as sparse as the water and fuel are precious, the 1979 cult classic Mad Max emerged as a high-octane story of vengeance and violence. Directed by George Miller, who kick-started the massive franchise, it not only introduced the world to Mel Gibson, but also set the stage for the dystopian genre's evolution. With a script that cut as sharp and fast as the vehicles it featured, Mad Max drove its narrative with an engine fueled by raw, unbridled emotion and sheer primal survival instinct. The film presents a society teetering on the brink of collapse, illustrated through its lean, gritty dialogue and stark, minimalist storytelling. The script, penned by James McCausland and Miller, masterfully uses the sparse, arid backdrop of a future Australia as both a character and a crucible, testing and defining its human components. It isn't just about the breakdown of social order. It's a probing examination of what happens to humanity when the thin veneer of civilization is stripped away, leaving only our baser instinct.
I grew up in an isolated rural town in Australia, big wide roads, and the was very significant in that. So I saw car culture from that point of view, and then I switched the point of view when I worked in a big city hospital in trauma, in emergency, and saw that dark side of the car culture, order side, and that sort of seeped into me, and that's basically what drove the first Mad Max character, to see how it would be affected by seeing the death of his friend and family and what would happen. And that kind of triggered off that character. But our budget was so low that we couldn't afford to shoot in streets full of people and other cars. So we shot in back streets that we couldn't afford to hire normal buildings. So we went to derelict buildings and shot there for nothing. And to explain that, I added the caption at the beginning, "a few years from now." And that sort of kicked it off being into the future somehow.
Despite this being Miller's directorial debut, upon release, Mad Max thundered past expectations, becoming a colossal box office success. Made on a budget of around $350,000, the film shocked the industry by raking in over $100 million worldwide, making it one of the most profitable films ever at that time. The reception was mostly positive, with particular acclaim for its innovative style and the high-octane action sequences that would become the series' hallmark. Miller broke new ground by leveraging the desolate Australian landscapes not only as settings, but as integral elements of the film's mood and character development. The emphasis on practical effects, stunts, and the kinetic energy of the movie continue to influence the future of action filmmaking, particularly in how it could be both choreographed and shot. Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we're going to explore and review the events in each film, culminating with a breakdown of the recently released Furiosa and Mad Max Saga, which doesn't really feature Mad Max. We'll see how the dialogue isn't merely spoken, but is driven by the urgent, brutal realities of a crumbling society, where every line and every shift of the gearbox tells a story of desperation and the human capacity for both barbarity and heroism.
And yet somehow when it got out around the world, in Japan they recognized Max as a kind of lone samurai, a Ronin samurai, and then in Scandinavia a lone Viking wandering the wasteland in search of some sort of meaning, and the French were first to see that it was a kind of Western on wheels. And suddenly I suddenly realized then that it was something much more than just the film we made. We tapped into an archetype, and by the time we did the second one, that was much more sort of conscious on that. It was I remember the feeling of relief that the film succeeded, and also a sense of wonder that somehow there is out there a collective unconsciousness that we tapped into. And basically it was a classic Joseph Campbell hero myth, and I think that's why these kind of characters, I guess, even predated cinema. They're told throughout all throughout folklore and mythology, I think.
Before the opening of the film, the Persian Gulf War saw the rapid destabilization of Western societal norms when Iranian forces launched a sudden offensive deep into Saudi Arabia. This led to the devastation of the Persian Gulf region. Within 2 days, the oil fields were engulfed in flames, halting exports and causing global prices to surge dramatically. The destruction extended to major oil channels like the Northwest and Trans-Persian pipelines, exacerbating the crisis. Consequently, the major Western oil conglomerates faced insurmountable financial crises, ultimately declaring bankruptcy as they could no longer honor their supply agreements. The repercussions of the conflict were global, but in Australia, the aftermath was particularly severe, with the economy teetering on the brink of collapse. As gold prices soared and inflation skyrocketed, governments worldwide resorted to martial law, with military takeovers temporarily stabilizing the chaotic situation. In Australia, economic turmoil led to the downfall of numerous businesses, massive layoffs, and the complete shutdown of heavy industries. Urban centres like Sydney and Melbourne were engulfed by panic and riots, prompting the government to mandate the construction of a titanium barrier around Canberra for enhanced security. Financial institutions then closed abruptly, leaving citizens stranded without access to their savings. Fuel shortages then led to a desperate scramble at gas stations, with people fighting over the last drops of gasoline. As societal norms disintegrated, ordinary citizens took up arms and the outback saw an increase in gang activity. The few remaining oil tankers became prime targets for attack, and vehicles stranded without fuel littered the highways, severing intercity communications and deepening the national crisis.
How's I gonna get in and get the gas? Cyanide, it's pumping. Chomp.
In this dystopian near future, Mad Max chronicles the bleak existence molded by fuel shortages and the resultant societal breakdown. The narrative centers around Max Rockatansky, a skilled highway patrol officer with the main force patrol, derisively known as the Bronze by their adversaries.
You're going to waste the bronze! You gotta do it big!
This underfunded unit strives to maintain order among the sparse towns of the outback, defending them against brutal gangs that terrorize the area, seeking gasoline and wreaking havoc.
People don't believe in heroes anymore.
I know, McAfee.
The story opens with a dramatic escape of Crawford Montesano, known as Knight Rider, a motorcycle gang member who killed a police officer and fled in his vehicle.
I am the Night Rider, the suicide machine!
With the other officers crashing in the pursuit, Max engages in a high-speed chase that ends with Knight Rider's death in a fiery crash, setting the stage for the gang's quest for revenge. The high-octane opening sequence immediately sets the tone for a film that refuses to slow down. It's a masterclass in action storytelling, efficiently setting up the post-apocalyptic world where the rule of law hangs by a thread and society teeters on the brink of total collapse. It's raw, gritty, and unforgiving, much like the landscape it depicts. This incident leaves many officers injured, prompting the police captain to warn Max about the inevitable backlash from Knight Rider's gang, led by the menacing toe cutter.
A Code 3 ran down a few days ago. Well, his friends, word's out there out to get you.
The gang, fueled by vengeance and cruelty, unleash a wave of violence. They plunder for fuel, vandalize properties, and assault townspeople, including a brutal attack on a young couple that tried to escape their clutches. Max and his colleague Jim Goose respond to this chaos, discovering the gang's youngest member, Johnny the Boy, amidst the wreckage alongside one of the victims.
Remember that Code 3? Well.
However, due to a lack of witnesses at his trial, Johnny is controversially released from the deteriorating halls of justice, and the decision shocks and infuriates Goose, leading to a heated confrontation filled with mutual threats of revenge.
You're not gonna let him walk out the door!
That's exactly what you're going to do.
Bubba Zanetti, Toe Cutter's second-in-command, reluctantly retrieves Johnny from the courthouse, his disdain for Johnny's reckless behavior and Toe Cutter's favoritism towards him palpable.
See you on the road like we saw the Night Rider!
Following the grim sequence of events, Johnny the Boy sabotages Goose's motorcycle at the Sugartown Cabaret, leading to a high-speed accident that miraculously leaves Goose unscathed. However, his fortune runs out when Johnny, spurred by Toe Cutter's malicious influence, causes Jim to crash a ute by hurling a brake drum through the windshield. Worse still, the vehicle overturns, leaking fuel, and the incapacitated Goose is set ablaze. With Jim severely burned, his harrowing state in the hospital ward drives Max to resign from the MFP in disgust and disillusionment.
I'm scared, Thief, of that red circus out there. I'm beginning to enjoy it.
Seeking solace, he embarks on a coastal trip with his wife Jessie and their young son. But the momentary relief turns tragic when Jessie encounters the gang. While she narrowly escapes an initial confrontation, the gang later track her to their residence, killing their dog. In a devastating second encounter, when Max runs off to hunt them down, both Jesse and their son are brutally run down and left grievously injured on the road. The attack proves fatal for their son, and eventually, as revealed in Mad Max 2, for Jesse as well. And driven by vengeful fury, Max reclaims his police gear and supercharged Black Pursuit Special.
I mean, they'll kill me, won't they?
Launching into a relentless hunt for the gang, he begins executing them with precision. Despite getting shot in the leg and having his hand run over, he then fatally shoots Bubba Zanetti. The pursuit continues, with Max forcing Toe Cutter into a lethal collision with a semi-truck. Despite Johnny's plea of innocence, Max then coldly attaches him to a wreck with handcuffs, setting a fuse with a grim choice: sever the handcuffs or his own ankle to escape the following explosion.
You can hack through your ankle in 5 minutes.
He then departs as it blows up in the background, driving stoically into a rainstorm, a symbol of his complete descent into the desolate moral wilderness that defines the new world.
Look any longer out on that road and I'm one of them, you know?
Mad Max offers a gripping exploration of character, presenting a stark look at human nature in a society teetering on the brink of collapse. Our protagonist begins the film as a stoic yet compassionate highway patrol officer, committed to his job and deeply rooted in a semblance of justice and order.
Well, I'll add it to my threat collection.
You're a good boy, Max. You're a good boy.
But his calm demeanor and professional restraint are put to the test as the lawlessness around him escalates. Following the brutal attack on his wife and child, his transformation into the vengeful Mad Max is both poignant and harrowing. This journey is marked by a gradual erosion of his morality and humanity, pushing him towards a path where the lines between right and wrong blur significantly. His descent is not instant, but a slow burn, fueled by personal loss and the ineffectiveness of the existing legal system, leading to his final break from his former self when he takes the law into his own hands.
He's a man kind of running away from his better self until one day that better self catches up to him. He's a guy who's been damaged by the world. Every time he engages with another human being in a chaotic world, they're taken away from him. And it's too painful in a way, so he figures the best thing to do is to wander the wasteland alone. But you can't do that. You have to engage with others. That's almost the purpose of life. We're here, as Einstein said, for the sake of other men. And that's through all of literature and history. That somehow, despite the sense of each of us being individually alone, it is only by the engagement of others do we ever have any hope of advancing as an individual, of growing, and as a group.
Mel Gibson's portrayal of Max is iconic, defining his early career and setting the stage for his future as an action star. He effectively captures the transition from a dedicated police officer to a hardened Avenger. His understated performance in the first half subtly conveys Max's growing disillusionment and fatigue with the crumbling society around him. Post-tragedy, Gibson masterfully shifts to a darker, more intense portrayal, driven by raw emotion and a thirst for vengeance, and his ability to communicate this transformation with minimal dialogue showcases his skill in utilizing facial expressions and body language to convey deep inner turmoil.
That was my first job, very first job. I was a kid, and it was a nice day. I just went in and met Mr. Miller, and he offered me a job. It was as easy as that.
I actually dropped a friend off because he'd been called in for an audition. So I drove him, dropped him, and then I waited for him in the waiting room with the girls at the casting agency. But I'd had a very bad weekend. I got into a brawl, and I didn't come out looking too pretty. I sort of took on half a rugby team, and it didn't work out too well on my end. I was looking pretty bad. They took Polaroids, because I was like really every color of the rainbow, and they put them up, and they said, "Man, we need freaks in this film. This is when you heal up, come back and see us." I was a young actor, and nobody had a job, and I thought, what the hell? It could have been a commercial for toilet cleaner. I would have gone for it, to earn a buck. So I went back, and they said, "And you are?" About 2 weeks later, I said, "That's me up there on the wall," because they had these pictures of me. And they went, "Oh my God!" And they sent me in and talked to George Miller, and he just kind of gave me the part right there. It was real weird.
As the primary antagonist, Toe Cutter is the chilling embodiment of chaos and anarchy. His character is deranged and erratic, with his cult-like and tyrannical leadership demonstrating how disorder fills the power vacuums left in a failing state. Toe Cutter's interactions with his gang and his confrontations with Max highlight his complex personality, one that is as intelligent as it is sadistic.
This is a threshold moment.
Toe Cutter, this isn't what I want.
Hugh Keays-Byrne's portrayal of Toe Cutter is chillingly magnetic. He brings an unhinged, menacing presence to every scene he inhabits, perfectly embodying the anarchic leader of the biker gang. His theatricality and intense gaze lend a sense of unpredictability to his character, making him a formidable and memorable antagonist, and his performance captures the nihilistic glee of a man who's embraced the chaos of his world, providing a stark contrast to Gibson's restrained portrayal of Max. When it comes to Jim Goose, he represents the lingering thread of optimism and morale within the police force, and his friendship with Max underscores the film's thematic exploration of loyalty and justice.
The bikers are still full of shit. You understand? The thing that made this film great was the fucking bronze, the police. Don't be listening to this from Johnny the Boy, you know, the fucking Toe Cutter's route over there. Don't be listening to that. And for people that are interested, they'll be on a float in the Mardi Gras very fucking soon. The thing that made this film great was the fucking bronze. Get it together, understand, it's been fucking 30 years, how long does it take?
His horrific fate acts as a critical turning point in the film, serving as one of the motivators for Max's transformation. The character is instrumental in demonstrating the personal stakes involved, and the brutal reality faced by those attempting to maintain order.
That thing in there, that's not the goose. No way.
All right, so the goose bought it. But that's the way you always came at the world.
Steve Bisley provides a lively and charismatic counterpoint to Gibson, adding a layer of humanity and warmth that represent the last vestiges of normalcy and optimism.
By the time we got to him, he was just sitting there trying to scream with his face ripped off.
Oh my God, what happened?
I don't know, man. I just got here myself.
Bisley's chemistry with Gibson is palpable, reinforcing their characters' friendship and mutual respect, and his transition from the easygoing, jovial officer to a victim of the gang's brutality is heart-wrenching and effectively amplifies the film's emotional stakes.
Give yourself full of living, you know? We're in a franchise on it now. There's nothing.
Max's wife Jessie symbolizes the remnants of normality and the civilian life that Max strives to protect. Her brutal victimization not only personifies the conflict for Max, but also serves as a narrative device to showcase the extent of societal decay. She brings emotional depth to the narrative, grounding Max's motivations in something deeply personal and universally relatable: love and family.
Broggo has talked me into buying him an ice cream, so I think I'll see you later.
Joanne Samuel conveys a tender, heartfelt dynamic to Jessie, grounding the high-octane action in intimate stakes. Samuel conveys both strength and vulnerability, embodying the everyday human desires for love and safety, and her portrayal makes Jessie's fate all the more tragic, highlighting the indiscriminate cruelty of the gang and the devastating impact on Max. Fifi is the police captain who tries to maintain a semblance of order and motivation among his officers. He provides a glimpse into the struggles faced by those in power positions, trying to uphold the law in a lawless world. His attempts to inspire his crew reflect the desperation and futility of fighting a tide of increasing anarchy, and serve as a foil to Max's journey, representing what Max might have become had he remained within the confines of the law.
Give him back the hero.
You really expect me to go for that crap?
Roger Ward's portrayal adds a distinct flavor to the ensemble, mixing authority with a desperate optimism that the law can still mean something.
Who is Fifi?
Yeah, well, the scarf was my idea. The bald head was George's idea. The leather, obviously, was George's. But I don't know who asked for the bare top. It might have been me. But I do recall if I was going bare top, I was going to wear the scarf, you know, a little bit modest. But since then, I've read that, you know, I looked a bit kinky with the leather shorts or whatever they were. But I never gave it a thought at the time, you know.
His robust, larger-than-life presence contrasts sharply with the desolation around him, and Ward's performance skillfully balances the line between authoritative figure and the motivational leader, trying to inspire his officers amidst the chaos.
What's he mean no one showed? Nobody showed!
Each character contributes significantly to the overarching theme of the film, the battle between civilization and savagery. Through these characters, the film explores the effect of societal collapse on individual psyches and the moral dilemmas faced by people as they navigate a world devoid of order.
You'll be back, Rockatansky. Yo-ho, Max!
Miller's direction ensures that the audience feels every twist and turn of the high-speed chases that dominate the landscape. The approach not only captivates, but also quickly establishes the stakes in a world where cars are not just transportation, but lifelines.
The vehicles are almost like an extension of the wardrobe of the characters.
The original Mad Max car, 1972-73 XB Ford Coupe, with the Scott hat and blower, known and loved throughout the world, or at least by those petrol heads in the Mad Max cult.
The V8 Interceptor has stayed with Max for 3 of the movies, and in the old westerns, each cowboy had his favourite horse. I think Roy Rogers had Trigger. Well, I think Max has his Interceptor.
The script, though minimalist, effectively supports a tightly wound narrative that explores the depths of human resilience and despair. Dialogue is light and often overshadowed by the roar of vengeance and the visceral visuals of the wasteland. Yet each line is packed with meaning, reinforcing character motivations and the bleakness of their world. The economy of dialogue helps maintain the relentless pacing of the film, ensuring the narrative moves as swiftly as the vehicles that populate it. The pacing of Mad Max is one of its greatest strengths. The film moves at breakneck speed, but also knows when to give the audience a moment to breathe. These quieter moments are crucial, providing necessary emotional weight and highlighting the stark contrast between the chaotic wasteland and the remnants of human connection and hope.
You know, I really, really liked action movies. They were a kind of pure use of the film language, really caught up even pre-sound, you know, the films of Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, the westerns and all of those, and then going on through the 70s. Alfred Hitchcock had a great saying, I try to make films where they don't have to read the subtitles in Japan, meaning that it's a visual medium, visual language. And it's very exciting. It's like music. It's like putting notes together in a certain order. There's a certain progression in order to make an experience for an audience. So I like to call these kind of movies visual music. And so, yeah, that was the thing that sort of drove those movies. And then to see what you could get out of the subtext in telling these stories.
Mad Max is an influential work in the action genre and a cornerstone of dystopian cinema. With its innovative use of car chases and stunts that are imitated to this day, its impact cannot be overstated.
I didn't get the role because of my acting ability. I got it because I could ride a motorbike. That's basically it. A couple of times where the camera operator had to be over the shoulder of my character, so that was done by Grant.
So there's a couple of people, loads of people did amazing things in that film. And the guy who shot it, David Egby, rode on the back of motorbikes at some extraordinary... He was a very brave man.
Everybody in that film was taking the most extraordinary risks.
Everyone thought when they saw this film that people must have died, you know, and there's some hairy bits, you know. There's a scene where this motorcycle dude falls off and he gets hit in the head by one of the tires. These were hardcore dudes and they did their own stunts and they didn't care. And this guy, they took his helmet off after that and there was blood coming out of his ears and his nose.
George Miller's visionary film is both a product of its time and a timeless exploration of the darker aspects of humanity and society. As an introduction to the dystopian world and the character of Max, it remains a compelling, sharply executed, and profoundly important film.
Well, when you tell a story, you know, you lay out a story, all the subtext that's there, particularly when it's a kind of an allegorical story, everyone takes from the story what they see. We all would look at it, and different things have different meaning to us. But there are obvious things about how to deal with hope in a broken world where everyone is broken. Is there any way that people can find a common humanity? And I think that's in there. But there's a lot of subtext in this story about, you know, dominance hierarchies. So, you know, there's resonances there, not only with today, where there's a you know, disproportionate distribution of resources, but it's always the case throughout history. It's a story repeated over and over again.
When Miller and Kennedy teamed up again 2 years later and made Mad Max 2, Warner Brothers decided to rename the picture The Road Warrior. After all, why would American audiences pay to see Mad Max 2 if they'd never even heard of Mad Max 1? It turned out to be the right move. The Road Warrior became a smash in the US, just as it had been around the world.
In the desolate wasteland of post-apocalyptic Australia, Mad Max 2, also known as The Road Warrior, returned us to the gasoline-drenched saga of Max Rockatansky. Directed by George Miller, the 1982 sequel not only surpassed its predecessor in sheer spectacle, but also in its sharp, mythic storytelling that carved out a new frontier in the action genre. Stripping away even more of civilization's facade, Miller ramps up the stakes and the speed, delivering a script that's as tight and explosive as the fuel-soaked roads its characters battle on. The film expands on the lore of the lone warrior, Max, deepening his character with minimalistic yet profoundly effective dialogue that cuts to the bone of this fractured world. Here, every line of dialogue and every grunt from Max is a piece of a survival puzzle in a world reduced to its primal instincts. The plot is a beautifully simple yet brutal ballet of chaos and order, of barbaric gangs and the desperate denizens of a besieged fuel outpost. This isn't just a chase film, it's a relentless fight for resources, a narrative driven as much by the turbocharged engines as by the haunted past of its protagonist.
So the second film, I think very perceptive actually, was quite a big shift, both in the themes of the story and in the techniques. And in fact, the first movie was really, for me, a very brutal experience in terms of creativity. I really thought I wasn't cut out to make movies. And then the second movie, even though it was much more physically demanding, we had more budget, but for complexity of reasons, we didn't have a lot of time. The second film was shot in continuity because the story allowed you to do that. So basically, we ran out of screenplay at one point, and for one day we didn't shoot while I figured out with Terry Hayes what we should do next. And I knew by then that's filmmaking, that things are always going to go wrong, and you have to ride that big dog in some way, to get it done.
Max's journey from a man broken by loss to a reluctant savior is mapped with precision in a script that's lean, mean, and every bit as unforgiving as the landscape. The Road Warrior not only soared at the box office, but also cemented its place as an important work in the action genre. With a budget of about $3 million, the film grossed approximately $36 million worldwide. Its commercial success was a testament to its resonant themes and groundbreaking aesthetic, which captivated audiences and critics alike.
So what exactly is the appeal of The Road Warrior? I can't think of another film that's as constantly moving as this one is. John Ford made history when he staged an Indian attack that lasted 11 minutes in his classic 1939 Western, Stagecoach. Well, the tanker chase in this movie runs 13 minutes, and it's just one component of a film that you could call a non-stop chase. I still regard it as a model for action movie making, all the more so because it was done without the digital special effects that dominate so many films today. What you see on screen is, for the most part, real, with all those incredible feats executed by a team of apparently fearless stunt performers.
But Mad Max 2 was not just a box office triumph. It was a critical milestone that demonstrated how sequels could deepen a story in its world, enhancing rather than merely continuing the saga of its characters. As we dive deeper into the film's elements, it'll become clear why The Road Warrior is frequently ranked among one of the greatest action films ever made.
But most importantly, Miller and his writing partner Terry Hayes, working with Brian Hannett, refined the character that introduced in Mad Max, exploring the roots of mythology and the works of Joseph Campbell, just as another filmmaker named George Lucas had done a decade earlier when he was writing Star Wars. It's no accident that Mad Max appealed to audiences around the globe. He has universal qualities as a warrior, a survivor, and ultimately as a champion of the oppressed.
You want to get out of here? You talk to me.
Miller didn't just make a sequel, he turbocharged the entire franchise into legendary status. It's gritty, it's grimy, and it's gloriously over the top. The end of coal and fuel power generators continued to plunge society into darkness, halting all electrical appliances and transforming food into a highly valuable resource. This scarcity triggered widespread looting by day and predatory attacks at night, underscoring a brutal new reality where only the strong could survive. In response, individuals began to band together, forming gangs that roamed the outback in makeshift vehicles like dune buggies, modified cars and bikes. As urban populations dwindled with people fleeing the cities, notable figures emerged to lead the migration into the harsh wilderness. Papagallo, a former oil company employee, ventured to a refinery guided by maps, while Max roamed deeper into the wasteland. Meanwhile, Lord Humongous, a disfigured former military officer, created a powerful gang by uniting various factions, including ex-military personnel, punks, and skinheads. With the disbandment of the MFP, even former officers found new allegiances within gangs. 3 years following the events of Mad Max, the Outback became a perilous haven for marauders hunting for fuel and resources. This relentless threat rendered fixed settlements untenable, forcing survivors to adopt a nomadic lifestyle. The backdrop to Mad Max 2 starkly contrasts with the original film and presents a far graver collapse of civilization. A narrator sets the stage, describing a world where cities have disintegrated and formidable tribes have waged war over juice, a slang term for oil.
Without fuel, they were nothing. The gangs took over the highways, ready to wage war for a tank of juice.
Society descended into chaos, marked by rampant looting and extreme violence, with humanity even regressing into cannibalism. Max, once a vengeful police officer, now roams the desert as a desolate figure. Adorned in his battered leather police uniform, he drives his scarred black supercharged V8 Pursuit Special, scavenging for food and, more critically, petrol. Accompanied only by his blue heeler dog and armed with a sawed-off shotgun, for which ammunition is exceedingly rare, Max embodies the lone survivor archetype. The Road Warrior propels audiences back into the parched heart of its dystopian universe, with a kinetic opening that sets up the desolate world, with Max encountering a team of marauders led by the formidable biker warrior Wes. After a fierce confrontation, Max drives the gang away and salvages gasoline from one of their wrecked vehicles. His journey then leads him to an apparently deserted autogyro. However, this turns out to be a trap set by its pilot, the Gyro Captain, using a poisonous snake. Max and his dog cleverly outmaneuver the captain, who then, desperate to stay alive, divulges the location of a nearby functioning oil refinery.
Kill me and you'll never find him.
Perched on a cliff overlooking it, they observe a motley band of marauders besieging the compound.
Like angry ants.
The group is led by the imposing Lord Humongous. Masked with a hockey helmet to cover his disfigured face, he conducts psychological warfare through eloquent speeches, urging the settlers to surrender peacefully.
Just walk away, and I spare you lives.
The tension escalates the next day, when 4 vehicles break out from the refinery, only to be pursued and either killed or captured by the marauders. Witnessing the brutality, Max intervenes, rescuing a gravely injured settler in exchange for fuel, though the man dies shortly after Max carries him into the compound.
If you had a contract, it was with him, and he died with him. Get rid of him.
While the others are skeptical of his intentions, he's welcomed by the feral kid, who wields a lethal boomerang. When Lord Humongous returns having captured those that left earlier, he proposes a deal: safe passage out of the wasteland in exchange for the refinery and its fuel.
And there will be an end to the horror. I await your answer.
His articulate offer sways a few of them, but Max proposes an alternative plan. He offers to retrieve an abandoned semi-truck he spotted earlier, which could transport their tanker of fuel, in exchange for his own freedom and some petrol.
You give me back my vehicle and as much juice as I can carry.
While the desperate settlers agree to Max's plan, they hold on to his car as collateral. Aided by the Gyro Captain providing air support, he manages to claim the truck and drive it back to the compound, despite attempts by the gang to intercept him and open the gate. The group, now ready to flee, invite him to join them, but the psychologically damaged Max chooses to collect his petrol and leave instead.
Tell me your story, man. See too many people die? Lose some family?
As the group repair the truck and ready for their exodus, furious that they'd defied his deal, Lord Humongous begins to kill the captured settlers. Unfortunately, Max's departure is halted when Wes, driving a nitrous oxide-enhanced vehicle, severely damages his car and injures him, a confrontation that also results in the death of Max's dog. Attempting to siphon the fuel, the marauders accidentally trigger a booby trap, which destroys the car and everyone around it.
Oh, hell. You blow it, you fall.
Barely conscious, Max is rescued by the captain, who airlifts him back to the refinery, where the settlers are hurriedly preparing to depart. Despite his injuries, Max offers to drive the newly repaired and heavily armored truck carrying the fuel tanker. Roaring out of the compound with many settlers manning armored positions and Pappagallo driving a powerful escort vehicle, they're rapidly pursued by the marauders in their modified vehicles. Above them, the captain tracks the violent chase in his gyrocopter, witnessing the relentless assault. Unfortunately, as the conflict intensifies, the settlers defending the tanker begin to fall one by one. Meanwhile, as the rest of the group escape, a small group of marauders infiltrate the now vacant refinery, only to find it rigged to explode. At the same time, the captain's participation ends abruptly, with his engine taking arrows from a dart gun, causing him to crash. On the road, Max and the feral kid face mounting odds. Wes manages to board the truck and nearly kills them both. However, a sudden catastrophic collision with Humongous' vehicle annihilates the chief antagonists, causing Max to lose control. In the aftermath, Max rescues the feral kid from the wreckage, only to discover the tanker was filled with sand. It dawns on him that he'd been used as a decoy, a ploy to divert the marauders, while the tribe escaped with the real fuel hidden in concealed barrels. With the pair rescued by the Gyro Captain, the story concludes with an epilogue explaining how the man that came from the sky eventually became the new leader of the group. The narrator, revealed to be the grown-up feral kid, recounts how he would later lead the great northern tribe himself, though he never encountered Max again.
And the Road Warrior, he lives now, only in my memory.
The sequel not only amplified the adrenaline-pumping action of its predecessor, but deepened the narrative's exploration of a civilization in decay. Max, portrayed once again by Mel Gibson, carries the scars of his past, both physical and emotional, into the sequel. His evolution is central to the film's narrative. From a vengeful drifter at the end of the first film, he's now become a hardened survivor, embodying the silent, reluctant hero archetype. His sparse dialogue and rugged demeanor mask a profound grief and a lingering sense of justice. Throughout the film, his actions reveal a gradual shift from self-interest to a more communal perspective. This transition is subtly portrayed through his interactions with the other characters, particularly the feral kid and the warrior woman, who evoke from him a protective, almost paternal instinct that he thought he'd lost. Mel Gibson's portrayal of Max Rockatansky is at the core of the film's emotional and dramatic impact. Gibson brings a brooding intensity, embodying the weariness of a man beaten down by loss, yet not entirely devoid of hope.
Cut the crap. I'm the best chance you've got.
His performance is both restrained and explosive, capturing the essence of a character who is as much a survivor as he is a reluctant hero.
The thing that defines the hero is that they come to a moment where they have to relinquish their own self-interest to a greater good. That's the fundamental gesture or behavior of the hero. Now, Max does that, but in a reluctant way. He doesn't want to be involved with other human beings. Whenever he gets involved with other human beings, somehow it's always too painful. So he's a kind of a good man running away from himself.
Played by Virginia Hay, the warrior woman is a fierce and capable defender of the refinery. Her initial skepticism towards Max reflects the community's distrust of outsiders, a necessary survival trait in their dangerous world. But her gradual acceptance helps bridge the gap between him and the others, symbolizing the potential for rebuilding trust and cooperation among strangers in a post-apocalyptic world. Hay's portrayal is fierce and commanding, bringing a powerful presence to her scenes. She embodies the resilience necessary to survive in a post-apocalypse, making her character both inspiring and formidable.
You die for a pipe dream!
Wrong. We fight for a belief.
The primary antagonist, Lord Humongous, is a compelling blend of physical intimidation and charismatic leadership. His masked visage and muscular build make him an imposing figure, while his articulate speeches reveal a cunning and persuasive leader.
Nobody gets out of here alive!
He effectively embodies the chaos that Max fights against, representing an order built on tyranny and fear. Kjell Nielsen portrays the Lord Humongous with a terrifying presence. His imposing physique and the ominous mask create an unforgettable visual, but it's Nielsen's controlled and menacing delivery that truly make the character so impactful. He exudes a barbaric magnetism, commanding his gang with a mix of eloquent threats and brutal directness, underscoring the chaotic leadership that thrives in the absence of societal order.
What are your favorite parts?
Favorite parts? This is going to sound really sick, but I laugh my head off when I see people getting their fingers cut off and things. I just think it's really clever the way that they can present that image and never hurt anyone, except maybe scar a few minds in the audience. I don't know.
Played by Bruce Spence, the Gyro Captain adds a layer of resourcefulness and humour to the grim setting. His character starts off as selfish and cowardly, but evolves through his interactions with Max and the others. Spence brings a quirky comic relief to the otherwise depressing narrative. His lanky physique and distinctive features are perfect for the role, providing a visual contrast to the rugged Max. His timing and expressive eyes add layers of personality to his character, turning what could have been a mere sidekick role into a memorable and integral part of the story.
Making a serious mistake, splitting a great team.
The Feral Kid is a visual and metaphorical, poignant representation of the New World. Wild, mute and savage, yet inherently innocent. He sees Max as a role model and protector, and their bond underscores one of the film's central themes, the search for humanity in a world devoid of it.
Go on, get out. Let's get.
Emil Minty's portrayal is hauntingly effective. Despite having no spoken lines, he communicates a range of emotions from wild aggression to curious affection towards Max. His performance is pivotal in enriching the film's exploration of lost innocence and the impact of a brutal world on its youngest inhabitants, and his ability to hold his own in scenes with Gibson is particularly impressive.
Yeah, and any writer worth his salt realizes that he's just making a piece of music or a blueprint, and that it's up to the person who has to say it to interpret it, so that you talk it over with him and usually come up with some good ideas, but it hardly ever stays the same. It's quite amazing. I don't bother to learn it, really. I mean, I read it a few times and then get your general gist of what's going on, and if I can, I try not to memorize any lines, so that when we rehearse, something has to come out, and whatever comes out is usually something fairly natural. But and with a film of this nature, of course, it's when I said before that George tells the story with images, you don't really need a lot of dialogue if those images are working for you.
Through minimal dialogue and focused action, the film crafts a narrative that is as much about the individuals as it is about the spectacle of the desolate Australian wasteland. The characters do not merely inhabit this world, they are formed and continuously reshaped by it, exploring the depths of human resilience and adaptability.
I think they are kind of silent movies, meaning they're silent movies with sound. Right. I remember I used to, when I first started, was interested in making films, I used to watch movies where I'd turn the sound off on the television, and just to see how they'd work. However, it's also interesting to me what you can do with sound. And I remember a startling moment when I met a critic who told me that he wrote film reviews for the Royal Blind Society. And I said, what, you mean blind people go to see movies? He said, of course they do. They don't see them, they listen to them. And I suddenly thought, yes, you can really get a lot of story from sound. In fact, you see with your ears in many cases. And so now those two things working synergistically, sound and the vision, allows the experience to be more immersive, I think.
Critically, Mad Max 2 is hailed as an extraordinary feat in filmmaking. It garnered widespread acclaim for its innovative action sequences, visionary direction by George Miller, and the dystopian landscape it vividly brought to life. The film is often lauded for its pacing and the intense vehicular action that would come to define the franchise. It was particularly praised for elevating the action blueprint with its minimalistic style and narrative efficiency, setting a new standard for sequels.
If you look at Road Warrior, we did a stunt which now is quite famous, in which guy does what they call a T-bone, who's going for a world record, where he's on a motorbike and he hits a vehicle which has just rolled and he flips. But what had happened is that his leg clipped it and he went into relaxation mode, knowing that he was injured.
The stunt has not gone according to plan. Director George Miller, who is trained as a doctor, examines stuntman Guy Norris. His injuries will not permit him to return to the production. Norris was, of course, supposed to land safely in the most reliable and advanced cushion yet devised, a huge mound of empty cardboard boxes.
It's a very dangerous stunt, and it's the type of stunt that's completely unpredictable. And if you don't leave the bike before the impact, then the bike takes the impact with you, and then your body's got no control. Once you start spinning like that, you can't hold. You've got to send yourself through the air there and then tight. But once you start spinning, there's no hold on.
No matter how hard the stuntman works to refine his craft, he will never eliminate the element of danger.
This enthusiastic reception helped propel the Mad Max franchise into a cultural phenomenon, influencing countless films and media in the dystopian and action genres. It excels in its straightforward yet compelling plot, and the dialogue is deliberately minimalistic, enhancing the desolate atmosphere and focusing attention on the visual and action elements of the movie. What dialogue exists is impactful, often delivered with an urgency that matches the fast pacing of the film. Speaking of pacing, it is relentless, with Miller building tension and providing just enough character interaction to keep the emotional stakes as compelling as the physical threats.
Well, the great thing about storyboards, they carry an enormous amount of information very, very quickly to everybody working on the film. The problem with storyboards is they miss what I call the fourth dimension, that's time. And when you miss time, there's no real narrative. But when we started, when we wrote, and then finally you confronted with the editing room, you used exactly the same process and language that a composer uses. The great thing, and a lot of editors don't understand, the great thing about working with Margaret Cecil, who happens to be my wife, is she understands emphatically that there has to be a powerful causal relationship between one shot and the next to make the film space coherent. Just as a composer has a very powerful causal relationship, one note to the next. Chord progression, tempo, tonality, melody, line, all of that almost gets to a mathematical level. So it's not chaos, it looks like chaos. And one of the things that you must hang on to is that everyone must work to the same logic.
Mad Max 2 is not just a great sequel, it was a defining moment in the action genre. Its blend of kinetic action, minimal dialogue, and compelling character arcs creates a cinematic experience that is both exhilarating and thought-provoking. Ultimately, for me, The Road Warrior stands as a testament to the power of visual storytelling and the potential of sequels to transcend their origins.
It usually depends on just how a story takes hold of me. As I say, I keep pushing them away, and those that are the most insistent, I find myself getting very enthusiastic about. And if you're enthusiastic and you have a track record and you have a relationship with the studios, people usually, are happy to make the films.
Why is your instinct to push them away at first?
Well, particularly the Mad Max movies. I just didn't, after the first one, I didn't want to make a second one. And as I said before, when I realized that, hey, we've tapped into this world, and it was an opportunity after feeling that the first one, I just didn't really succeed. And I learned so much on the first one that to do it a second time was a great thing.
Death is listening and will take the first man that screams.
Thunderdome's simple. I know you won't break the rules. There aren't any.
Strap in and brace yourself for a bumpy ride back to the odyssey of Mad Max with Beyond Thunderdome, the third installment in the franchise. This film takes the iconic character of Max into uncharted territories, both literally and figuratively, with a script that attempts to balance the visceral intensity of its predecessors with a more ambitious, albeit uneven, narrative structure. Right off the bat, Beyond Thunderdome diverges from the raw, relentless energy of Mad Max 2 to explore new dynamics of power, survival, and civilization. The film introduces Bartertown, a gritty, bustling trade hub governed by the law of supply and demand, and the Thunderdome, a gladiatorial arena where disputes are settled through brutal combat. The script, co-written by Terry Hayes, George Miller, and George Ogilvie, ventures into complex themes of governance, morality, and redemption, presenting a Max who is not just a wanderer, but an unwitting catalyst for change. However, while the film aims to provide depth and expand its universe, it arguably bites off more than it can chew, leading to a narrative that often feels as patchy as the world it depicts. The dialogue swings between sharp wit and expositional heft, grappling with its own ambitions to flesh out a society teetering on the edge of both collapse and rebirth. The pacing too is a mixed bag, combining slow-burning political intrigue with high-octane action sequences that strive to satisfy the thirst for the franchise's signature chaos.
George, let's go back just for a little bit to Mad Max 1. Now, the figure I've heard quoted is $300,000 for Mad Max 1.
$380,000.
$80,000, all right. Then Road Warrior was how much?
It was around about $4 or $5 million.
And at that time, wasn't it the most expensive film ever made in Australia?
Yeah.
Okay, now this one is how much?
Oh, this is almost triple that, so for Australia it's very expensive.
Over 12?
Oh, yeah. It was an expensive film because we had so much to do in it. In fact, our biggest problem was cramming all that information into the 100 or so minutes that we had.
With a budget notably larger than its predecessors of $10 million, the film only grossed $36 million. Critically, Beyond Thunderdome received a mixed to positive reception. It's praised for its inventive production design and the introduction of memorable elements like the Thunderdome itself. However, some had reservations about the convoluted structure and its shift towards a slower, narrative-driven approach. In this breakdown and review, we'll dissect how Beyond Thunderdome handles its hero's legacy, and whether it enhances or dilutes the raw dystopian essence that Mad Max fans have come to crave.
This is a room in the middle of the Art Deco building, which we've been working in for 30 years. It's a large room, and basically we call it the Mad Max room, because it was here where Brendan McCarthy and I sat down for the first time and talked out the story and then quickly drafted it in prose form. You know, he said, I'm here to make sure that you don't screw up the next Mad Max movie. He said that quite without any irony or whatever.
George calls me the sort of the guardian of Mad Max in a way. After Road Warrior, Thunderdome was great, but I felt a bit disappointed, and I felt that it didn't quite do what, I was hoping for. I think the essence of a Mad Max film is the sort of, there's the Joseph Campbell mythological stuff, but there's also Demolition Derby, there's that side of it as well. I remember a critic once talking about Mad Max 2, talking about the delight in destruction in the film, and I thought, when a little boy has got a toy and he's going, ah! There's that element in George's work that I think I want to keep that.
Following the catastrophic collapse of the global economy and the disintegration of societal structures worldwide, governments scrambled to secure the declining oil reserves, leading to a devastating nuclear exchange. The initial aggressor remains unknown, but the aftermath affected all, ushering in a nuclear winter. Amidst this chaos, Captain Walker attempted to evacuate survivors from Sydney using a Boeing 747, but the aircraft crashed due to turbulence, leading to the formation of a tribal society among the survivors. As nuclear winter gave way to a nuclear summer, the climate shifted drastically, drying out the landscape and expanding the deserts. 15 years after the events of Mad Max 2, civilization has virtually ceased to exist, leaving only remnants that either scavenge from the old world or attempt to forge new beginnings. Water has also become scarce and contaminated with radiation. In this harsh environment, Bartertown emerges as a beacon of ingenuity, harnessing methane from pig feces as a power source. Max Rockatansky, once a member of the MFP, finds himself in the merciless desert after his victory over Lord Humongous and his marauding bikers in Mad Max 2. His journey leads him to Bartertown, a market town outpost in the heart of the wasteland, ruled by the autocratic Queen Auntie entity. As he navigates the treacherous environment, he also encounters the Lost Tribe, a community of marooned children who will form their own society, waiting for a hero to lead them. The question arises whether Max, the solitary warrior, is indeed the savior they seek.
One of us will come.
Traveling across the desert in a camel-drawn truck, Max is ambushed by Jedediah and his boy, airborne bandits who steal his belongings and his vehicle. Resourceless and alone, he continues on foot until he reaches the only semblance of civilization in the vast wasteland, the seedy, ruthless community of Bartertown, presided over by the formidable Auntie entity.
What's a little fallout, huh?
Here, a semblance of modern conveniences such as electricity, vehicles, and functional technology persists, uniquely powered by a rudimentary methane refinery.
Bullshit. Pig shit. All run by a high-powered gas.
This setup operates in the underworld beneath the town, utilizing an aged semi-tractor to generate power. The refinery is managed by Master, a shrewd diminutive figure who relies on his physically imposing but intellectually limited bodyguard, Blaster.
Little one is called Master. He's the brain, the other one is the muscle.
Together, known as Master Blaster, they maintain a precarious balance of power with Anti-Entity, despite Master beginning to leverage his indispensable technical skills to enforce energy embargoes, thereby challenging her rule.
Embargo on!
Entity is angry by Master's audacity, but is constrained from openly confronting him due to his operational knowledge. She views Max as a capable yet expendable combatant, and coaxes him into engaging in a duel with Blaster in the Thunderdome, a stadium used to settle disputes in Bartertown. The arrangement essentially makes what is a political assassination appear as a lawful resolution.
We want to keep the brain, dump the body.
In the underworld, Max befriends Pig Killer, a convict jailed for slaughtering a pig to feed his starving children.
Had to feed the kids. Doesn't worry me, down here last 2-3 years.
We learn the Thunderdome operates under a brutal yet straightforward rule charted by the spectators. Following an intense and prolonged battle, Max subdues Blaster but spares his life upon realizing his childlike mental state.
He's got the mind of a child.
This wasn't part of the deal.
Infuriated by his defiance, Auntie orders Blaster's execution and enforces the town's rigid law against Max for breaking his agreement. The town's system of justice, embodied by the wheel, a large spinning metal disc marked with different fates such as death, hard labor, acquittal, and others, is then spun to determine Max's punishment. The wheel condemns Max to the Gulag, resulting in his exile into the barren desert wastes. Here the narrative takes a dramatic turn. After being exiled, Max, near death from the harsh conditions, is rescued by a group of children led by Savannah Nix. Survivors from a nearby Qantas Boeing 747 crash, they've established a tribal community in a sheltered desert oasis. They preserve the memory of the past with ritualistic stories or tells, centered on a messianic figure, Captain Walker, who they believe will repair their shattered aircraft and return them to civilization.
It was heartful to you, Captain Walker.
Take us home.
The tales recount that Captain G.L. Walker once led the adults on a mission for help, promising to return, but never did, and due to Max's resemblance to Walker, the children believe he'd come to lead them to Tomorrow Morrowland, a symbol of their home.
This apocalypse happened and it's all finished. I ain't Captain Walker.
After Max is nursed back to health, he tries to dissuade the children from leaving the safety of their oasis by describing the dystopic state of the world, particularly the dangers of Bartertown.
I'm not Captain Walker. And I say we're gonna stay here. The first place you'll find is a sleaze pit called Bartertown.
However, some of the children, driven by hope and legend, decide to venture out in search of Tomorrow Morrowland. And so, feeling a sense of responsibility, he follows them.
You gotta get him back. You gotta, Captain.
After saving them from quicksand, Max and the children reach the outskirts of Bartertown in search of Master, who, without his protector, has become little more than a slave to Anti-Entity. With the help of Pig Killer, who they also free, they attempt to liberate Master. Their actions inadvertently alert the guards, sparking a frenetic chase that leads to significant damage to Bartertown's methane factory.
Hang on!
The chaos culminates at the hideout of Jedediah, where Max persuades him to assist in their escape using his Transvania PL-12 air tug.
It's your lucky day.
It is?
You got a plane.
I have.
With a limited space on the plane and marauders in hot pursuit, Max sacrifices his chance of escape, staying behind to ensure the plane has enough runway to take off.
Between them and us, it's not enough runway.
It will be.
Much to his surprise, his bravery earns Anti-Entity's respect, and she ends up sparing his life, departing with intentions to rebuild Bartertown.
Well, ain't we a pair, Raggedy Man?
Years later, in the ruins of a devastated Sydney, the children, grown older, are seen gathered around fires with their own families. Savannah, now their leader, continues the tradition of the nightly tale, narrating their odyssey and the legend of their journey led by Max, forever shaping their lore and survival.
We does the tell so that we remember who we was and where we came from.
Beyond Thunderdome presents an intriguing evolution in the saga, introducing new elements to the post-apocalyptic landscape that George Miller has so vividly crafted. The film opens a new chapter for Max, played with the characteristic gruff charm of Mel Gibson, delivering an initial impression that mixes the familiar desolation with a more organized form of chaos.
This one seems less violent than Road Warrior. Now, I've heard that Warner Brothers asked you to make some cuts. Was it to do with the violence?
No, Warner Brothers were very good. They didn't... Because the story was dealing with children, it naturally went in that direction. There wasn't a conscious decision, let's cut down on the violence. It was just because the children are in the story, it just sort of went in that direction. It was a natural flow. The cuts that we made to the film were just cuts after a test screening. Unfortunately, we had to rush the film out. We literally were working night and day, and I didn't see the film, and we made some cuts for pace. There was never any conscious attempt to say, let's cut down the violence, we've got too much flack on Road Warrior. Well, that wasn't the case. It was just the nature of the story. I think it's a more inspirational story, and it just didn't sit right to be more violent.
Max remains a central figure in the saga, his persona evolving significantly from the first two films. Now wearier and more resigned, he's a survivalist who, despite his tough exterior, cannot completely shun his inherent moral compass. His engagement with the civilization in Bartertown, and later the tribe of children, showcases his complexity as a reluctant hero. He is drawn into conflicts that test his resolve and adaptability, ultimately pushing him towards a leadership role in his continuing battle to find a semblance of peace in a chaotic world.
Oh yeah, he's got his own code of ethics. They're not mine, but they work for him in that terrible world he's in.
One day we were talking generally about Mad Max, and we started talking about a story, and suddenly we realized we had the beginnings of a story. And I was at Kerry actually, and one time I was having dinner with him in a restaurant, and he started to talk about a story, and I suddenly said, oh my God, that's Mad Max 3. I mean, we have a story there.
Mel Gibson returns as Max, delivering a nuanced portrayal of the weary, battle-scarred wanderer. Gibson's performance captures a Max who is more introspective and burdened than ever, reflecting the cumulative effects of his past traumas and losses. His hardened exterior masks a lingering humanity, which Gibson skillfully reveals in subtle expressions and moments of quiet. His ability to convey deep emotion with minimal dialogue continues to anchor the series.
You gotta understand that this is home. I ain't Captain Walker.
Auntie Entity is a formidable addition to the series. As the ruler of Bartertown, she's both powerful and strategic, embodying a type of leadership forged from the harshness of the world. Her backstory as someone who rose from nothing to rule the town make her more than just a typical antagonist, and her interactions with Max are charged with a mix of rivalry and mutual respect, reflecting her complexity as a leader who is ruthless yet capable of seeing the larger picture.
Congratulations, first to survive the audition.
Tina Turner's portrayal of Auntie Entity is one of the highlights of the film. She brings an alluring charm and a formidable presence to the role, embodying the brutal yet visionary temperament needed to hold a town together. Turner's performance is both commanding and nuanced, suggesting a complex backstory and a survivor's resilience. Her interactions with Max are charged with tension and shared respect, making their dynamic one of the most engaging aspects of the movie.
I'll do anything to protect it. Today is necessary to kill a man.
The duo of Master and Blaster, who together controlled Bartertown's energy supply, represented the physical and intellectual symbiosis necessary for survival. Master, the brains, is small and elderly, yet sharp and cunning, while Blaster, the brawn, is physically imposing but mentally limited. Their relationship encapsulates the exploration of power dynamics and manipulation, providing a critical look at how different abilities are valued in a post-apocalyptic society. Angelo Rossito as Master and Paul Larson as Blaster create a memorable and sympathetic duo. Rossito's Master is cunning and pragmatic, while Larson's Blaster is an imposing presence, yet evokes sympathy through his vulnerability, and their performance highlights the theme of exploitation and control, adding a layer of social commentary to the film.
Him sad, brain broken. Lester, I'm sorry. No.
The children that Max encounters represent innocence and hope, contrasting starkly with the cynical, survival-driven adults of Bartertown. They view Max as a hero figure, a projection of their myths and legends. This forces Max to confront his own role in the larger narrative of survival and redemption. Their collective development, from naive survivors to a more self-aware and proactive community, mirrors themes of growth and the loss of innocence. Savannah Nix stands out among the children as a leader and the most forceful proponent of the search for Tomorrow Morrowland. Her determination and courage make her a younger parallel to Max, highlighting themes of leadership and moral conviction in extreme circumstances. Her interactions with Max challenge his views on survival and responsibility, pushing him to engage more deeply with the group's plight and what his purpose now was. Helen Boudet delivers a strong performance as Savannah Nix. She conveys both the strength and the desperation of someone forced to grow up too quickly in a harsh world, and her presence brings a sense of urgency and hope to the narrative, embodying the film's exploration of future generations carving out a new path.
But most of all remembers the man who finded us.
From Max's continued evolution to Auntie Entity's complex governance and the hopeful innocence of the children, the film uses its characters to probe deeper into what it means to seek order and humanity in a disordered world.
Bartertown will live! We will rebuild!
The script divides its focus between the conflict in Bartertown and the tribe of children. This bifurcation can feel disjointed at times. The first half of the film, focusing on Bartertown and the Thunderdome, is tight and narratively engaging, filled with intrigue and action. However, the second half, while rich in thematic material about innocence and survival, slows the pacing and dilutes the raw energy typical of the franchise.
Somebody asked me that, will you do a Mad Max 3? And I said, no, never. I'll never do a Mad Max 3, but here I am. And the only reason for doing it is because it's simply better. You know, what they're trying to achieve is something much better. I mean, it's really boring doing the same thing over and over. I mean, this film is a lot different from the other two. It's very much the same. It still has that hard-edged sort of thing running through it, but they've managed to use that sort of hard-edged, nihilistic view of life in this miserable world of Mad Max 3. They've used that as a vehicle to get to something a little more hopeful at the end of this.
Dialogue in Beyond Thunderdome is also more expository than in the previous films, reflecting the movie's shift towards more comprehensive world building. The action sequences, especially those in the Thunderdome and the chase at the end, however, retain the kinetic energy that fans expected, albeit in a more sanitized way.
We don't do any of the surgical shots, any of the knife going in. I think that people tend to confuse violence with a feeling of fear and all of those things. I can honestly tell you, because I've seen the Mad Max pictures on the editing bench so many times, there are very, very few shots which could in any way be construed as gory. What it does have is an enormous pace in the cutting, and we seek to put audiences through intense emotional experiences. If you don't want an intense emotional experience, go to sleep, you know. I don't personally like films where you see people's heads being blown off or their heart sort of being ripped out, that style of thing. But we couldn't have a post-apocalyptic world with people going around saying, "Excuse me, would you mind if I took your vehicle?" They just don't work like that, you know.
Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome is a film of two halves, one rooted in the gritty, high-octane tradition of the franchise, and another that ventures into more philosophical territory, examining what civilization means in a world reborn from ashes.
I'm sick of going along to movies and being bored, sitting there thinking, oh no, how long to go, you know? So I think there's a real demand for a high-paced story. Maybe that's what we can... The first one was a very bleak revenge story. I don't think that George particularly enjoys, now looking back, the sensibilities captured in that film. The second one was a more generous film. The third one is a journey about a man being rehumanized. It has to have, as you know, sort of more positive values.
While it may not deliver the relentless action of The Road Warrior, it provides a meaningful expansion on the themes of society and redemption. Despite its uneven pacing and divided narrative focus, the film offers enough spectacle and depth to be a worthy continuation of the Mad Max Saga. It may not be the strongest entry in the series, but Beyond Thunderdome is an ambitious film that strives to say something profound about the instinct to rebuild and the ways in which we cling to or reject the remnants of the past.
Would you like to live in this world?
No. I live in it when I'm doing the part. I've lived it already. I have lived her life. I didn't build a town, but I basically built a life for myself after my divorce. Building is building. She built more of an empire, her little town. I built another type of empire for myself personally. There's definitely a connection.
It was hard to know who was more crazy, me
or everyone else. I am the one who runs from both the living and the dead. A man reduced to a single instinct. Survive.
I am awaited in Valhalla! Fuck him up! Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Mad Max Fury Road is a high-octane, relentless assault on the senses. Released in 2015 and directed by George Miller, this adrenaline-fueled resurrection of the franchise erupts from the starting line with a ferocity that leaves you clinging to the edge of your seat. With Tom Hardy stepping into the dusty boots of the titular character, the film reimagines the dystopian universe with even harsher landscapes and even more desperate survivors. But it's not just Max this time. Charlize Theron's Imperator Furiosa drives the heart of the story, steering us into a maelstrom of chaos and rebellion.
And I remember you said to me, Brendan, I know how you work. You conceive the whole of a scene. You think in whole scenes. And until you said it, I wasn't even aware I was doing it. I kept on pushing Fury Road away, never wanted to make the movie. And then I was a long flight from Los Angeles to Sydney over the Pacific one night, and in that dissociated, hypnagogic state, the movie played out in my head. And that's when I realized there was some sort of gravitational pull to this story. And I told Doug and everyone, I think we'll be making a Mad Max, and that was back in the day.
Co-written by George Miller, Brendan McCarthy and Nico Lathyrus, the script is a workshop in economic storytelling. Dialogue is sparse, but every word carries weight, every grunting gaze loaded with meaning. This is a film that tells its story through action, where the character development is hammered out through relentless chases and battles in a world gone completely mad. It's a visual spectacle with a pounding heart, a turbocharged engine, and a soul that burns as bright and fierce as the explosions that light up the screen.
It feels to me like opera because it's so big, it's so expansive. It's a blend between reality but awesome, huge spectacle.
None of it defies the laws of physics. It's not people flying or space vehicles or anything like that.
All the crashes are real crashes, all the cars are real cars, all the stunts are real stunts. You know, we have a lot of CG assist in removals of safety cables and to help with the backgrounds. But it was really about trying to go back to the roots of Mad Max 1 and Road Warrior Mad Max 2 to get that kinetic energy on camera.
As we delve deeper into our breakdown and review, we'll explore how the film's script, performances, and direction all combine to create a cinematic experience that's as thought-provoking as it is visually exhilarating.
Well, never expected to make other Mad movies after the 80s, but I was lucky enough to be working just at the point that the digital dispensation came along. After Jurassic Park, Babe was one of the first films to use digital filmmaking. I went on to other films like Happy Feet and so on. And I thought, God, if we were to make another Mad Max, and particularly if it was a continuous chase film, we could do things that we could never have dreamt of back in the day. Seemingly trivial things, like you could keep the skies consistent. You can make every stuntman and actor absolutely safe with cables and so on, and mats and things that you couldn't do in the past. The pure technology of it drew me in, and then I got really excited by trying to do that with the new tools.
Decades after a catastrophic apocalypse, Australia has devolved into a barren desert wasteland where civilization has all but collapsed. Max Rockatansky finds himself ensnared by the War Boys, the fanatical army of the despotic cult leader Immortan Joe, who reigns over a precious aquifer known as the Citadel.
You will rise from the ashes of this world!
Identified as a universal blood donor, he's subjugated to a life of captivity, used as a living blood bag for Nux, a sickly war boy. In the midst of this, Imperator Furiosa is dispatched in her fortified war rig to retrieve gasoline from the nearby gas town. Unbeknownst to Joe, she veers off the designated route, initiating her covert plan to liberate Joe's 5 wives, a group of women selected for breeding due to their health and beauty. But upon realizing the disappearance of his wives, Joe mobilizes his entire army and calls for reinforcements from his allies in Gastown and the Bullet Farm, led by the People Eater and the Bullet Farmer respectively. From the explosive start, Fury Road grabs the audience's attention and doesn't let go. As Furiosa enters the territory of the Citadel's rivals, the Buzzards, a fierce skirmish ensues. Despite being outnumbered, Furiosa and her Warboys escort, still unaware of her betrayal, manage to fend off their attackers. She then drives into a sandstorm to evade further pursuit, a bold move that ultimately exposes her treachery to her crew.
Why can't you stop? What have you done?
In the chaos, Nux, indoctrinated with Joe's promise of an afterlife in Valhalla, tries to sacrifice himself to destroy the war rig by crashing into it. Max, who escaped his bonds, foils the attempt, leading to the destruction of Nux's vehicle. Post-storm, Max encounters Furiosa repairing the rig, along with the wives who are using water to cleanse themselves and remove their metal chastity belts. A fight ensues between the pair, ending with Max commandeering the rig, only to be stopped by its kill switch.
Kill switches. I set the sequence myself. This rig goes nowhere without me.
And so, reluctantly, Max agrees to join forces with Furiosa and the wives. Their uneasy alliance is tested when a mechanical failure, caused by Nux tampering with the fuel pod's hydraulic brake connector, locks the wheels.
Dragging something out back! I think it's the fuel pod!
As they address this issue, Nux launches a surprise attack, but is quickly subdued and kicked out of the rig. Defeated, he returns to Joe, bearing only a fragment of a dress as evidence of his encounter.
The war boy says he was on the war rig!
Furiosa then navigates the war rig through the territory of the Rock Riders into a narrow canyon, where she's arranged for safe passage in exchange for gasoline. However, Immortan Joe's forces are hot on their heels. As Furiosa accelerates through the canyon, the Rock Riders detonate explosives to collapse the walls, aiming to block Joe's pursuit. Despite their efforts though, Joe's convoy manages to breach the blockade and attack the rig once again. During the intense chase that follows, Nux manages to board the rig while Joe attempts to shoot Furiosa. In a tragic turn of events, Angahard, Joe's pregnant wife, tries to protect Furiosa, but falls and is fatally run over by the Gigahorse, her death leaving the other wives in profound grief. Joe's chief doctor, the organic mechanic, is unable to save Angahard's baby, who also perishes.
You lost a baby brother. Perfect in every way.
Amidst the turmoil, Furiosa reveals to Max her destination, the green place of many mothers, a verdant refuge she remembered from her childhood.
How do you know this place exists?
I was born there.
Where is this green place?
It's a long night's run, heading east.
Meanwhile, devastated by his failure and role in Angahard's death, Nux is comforted by Capable, one of the wives, who is moved by his genuine remorse.
He's alright. My own blood bag driving the rig that killed her.
I'd say it was your manifest destiny.
As night falls, the rig becomes stuck in deep mud. Using explosives, Furiosa and Max manage to hinder Joe's forces momentarily. However, their respite is short-lived as the Bullet Farmer, one of Joe's allies, continues the pursuit.
Just one angry shot for Furiosa!
Nux's timely intervention helps dislodge the rig, while Furiosa successfully blinds the Bullet Farmer with a well-aimed shot. Undeterred, he retaliates with machine gun fire and grenades, forcing Max to take it upon himself to eliminate them.
Sing, brothers! Sing! Sing!
As dawn illuminates their path, the rig makes its way through a blend of swampland and desert landscapes. The journey takes a dramatic turn when the group encounters a naked woman standing alone, a trap that Max is quick to identify.
That's bait.
Despite the suspicion, Furiosa declares her affiliation with the Vuvlini, her former clan. The woman, identified as Valkyrie, then signals to a group of bikers, who recognize Furiosa as a long-lost member of their clan.
I am one of the Vuvlini! The many mothers!
The reunion is bittersweet, as Furiosa learns that the swampy terrain they'd passed earlier was once the lush green place of her childhood, now a desolate and uninhabitable swamp.
But if you came from the west, you passed it.
Resolved yet disheartened, the group decide to venture across the vast salt flats on their motorbikes, hoping to find a new place to settle. Initially, Max chooses to remain behind, but haunted by visions of those he let down in the past, he persuades the group to reconsider their plan. He then proposes a bold strategy: return to the Citadel, rich with water and greenery hoarded by Joe, and trap his forces in the Biker's Canyon.
The 160 days ride that way, there's nothing but salt.
Their return journey culminates in a fierce confrontation with Joe and his dwindling army, and during the intense battle, Furiosa is severely wounded. Joe then tries to use his car to block the rig, as Max grapples with his formidable eldest son, Rictus Erectus. Amidst the chaos, Terce is captured, but manages to distract Joe long enough for Furiosa to fatally injure him by ensnaring his mask in the rotating wheels of his car. In a final act of heroism, Nux sacrifices himself by deliberately crashing the rig, blocking the canyon with the wreckage. This not only kills Rictus, but also ensures their escape. As Furiosa's life hangs in the balance, Max transfuses his blood to save her, and upon their triumphant return to the Citadel, the revelation of Joe's demise elicits jubilations among the citizens, signaling the end of his tyrannical reign. Amidst a celebration, Furiosa and the wives are exalted as new leaders, raised aloft by the child war boys. Meanwhile, Max shares a moment of silent acknowledgement with Furiosa before he vanishes into the crowd, his lone wanderer's spirit undimmed.
Whatever you have to do, however long it takes, promise me you'll find your way home. Plant this seed. Protect the green place.
Angharad used to call them anti-seed.
Plant one and watch something die.
Seeds.
These are from home, the real thing. We can start again, just like the old days.
Feels like hope.
Fury Road revitalized the venerable Mad Max franchise with a combustible mix of kinetic energy and striking visuals. The script served not merely as a backdrop for high-octane action, but as a foundation for rich narrative exploration and character development. Fury Road is a testament to how a visually driven action film can also deliver deeply nuanced characters. Each character's journey is intricately woven into the chaos, revealing their complexities through actions rather than exposition.
It's important to remember that we sat and talked about the movie a lot and actually wrote a prose version of the story before we started the storyboards. We knew basically where it was going to be going. And Brendan was like telling me, you know, the way you said it the other day was plug in the amps and start playing a bit of rock and roll. And whatever you do not disappoint me, George. You said that from the very beginning. I'm here to make sure that you don't disappoint me.
So we're basically just sitting in a truck whilst people attack you. And somehow you've got to tell the story that this is a road to redemption.
I think it could be very frustrating to a lot of people, but to George, it's in the challenge of all of that, it's almost what he thrives in, and that's when he comes alive.
Acting in a movie which is visually driven, as in watching what a character does by seeing them go through one physical event after another and how it affects them, was a very difficult story to tell. You know, we were very hot. And George will ask you to do things which may seem insane, and they are. And then when you see the movie, having been there, and I see what he meant now, and he was trying to explain in the sand when we were out there, and it was a nightmare. A brilliant nightmare, and confusing.
Tom Hardy's Max is haunted by visions of those he couldn't save. Initially, he's portrayed as a feral survivor, driven solely by the need to escape. But over the course of their perilous journey, he transitions from a solitary figure concerned only with his own survival to a pivotal ally in Furiosa's quest. His decision to help the group demonstrates a regained sense of humanity and purpose, marking a significant evolution from his detached, survivalist beginnings.
I think what George really, really succeeded at is creating a world that I think will be extremely satisfying to his loyal fans who love the movies from the 70s, but also to a generation who might not know those movies.
Everybody wanted to achieve George's vision, really. What he and ultimately, you know, just wanted to make him happy because he had a plan.
Tom Hardy steps into the iconic role of Max with a brooding intensity that perfectly suits the character's rugged, laconic nature. Hardy's portrayal is both physical and subtle. His Max is a man of few words but many expressions. Through grunts, glances, and brief flashes of vulnerability, Hardy conveys a complex inner life haunted by loss and fueled by survival instinct.
You know, hope is a mistake. My name is Max.
His performance builds on Mel Gibson's legacy while adding his unique touch to the character, crafting a Max who's both familiar and freshly compelling.
With inheriting a character with a legacy like Mad Max, who's synonymous with Mel Gibson, and there's no grey area, it's black and white, and a lot of people, rightly so, say, if it's not Mel Gibson playing Mad Max, then it's not Mad Max, and I'm just not interested. And that's a bit of a counterpoint to the celebration of getting a part where you're like really excited to play it, to then realise that actually you're set up immediately for failure, in that sense of those whom the gods wish to destroy they first call promising. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a bit disappointing. But at the same time, what I have to remember is that George and Mel went on a journey together through three movies with George's Max, who Mel played, Mel is Mad Max, and George then asked me to play Max in his fourth installment in his further development of character. So actually I didn't really have to bring anything new or different to it. I'm just a different person anyway that's in this role now. And ultimately Max is George and comes from George's imagination, so all I had to do was really take a load off and not try to be anything special or different, but just transmute whatever George's vision was and try to do exactly what he wanted when he wanted. And actually I'm a much smaller cog in a very, very big ensemble piece.
Tom needs to feel very, very safe. I think all actors do, particularly taking on a big leading role, because in many ways he's a character actor. And I think he lost trust in the process.
I don't think he understood that style of filmmaking where, there are all these little moments that'll come together in the cutting room, a montage style. I think he'd been used to being able to run with a whole scene and feel it out, and it really wasn't that kind of film.
It wasn't until the film was finally cut that Tom and Charlize and a lot of the cast realized what I was trying to do. It was until you actually see it in its final form. And that's when Tom, I think it was the Cannes Film Festival, publicly apologized.
I suddenly got what George was talking about, actually, because for 7 months, I think the most complicated piece for me, or the most frustrating thing for me, or the hardest part of it, was trying to know what George wanted me to do at any given minute. I have to apologize to you because I got frustrated, and there was no way that George could have explained what he could see in the sand when we were out there. I mean, I knew he was brilliant, but I didn't quite know how brilliant until I saw that. That's my first reaction was, oh my God, I owe George an apology for being so myopic.
Imperator Furiosa is introduced as a formidable warrior, driven by a clear moral vision. Her mission to rescue the wives from a life of servitude is the catalyst for the plot, but her character is more than just a rebel.
Of course they meet, and of course there's a relationship, an unspoken understanding, and there's a connection between those two. And it was essential that they met and that they connect and they help one another and they move forward.
They're built to survive the most isolated, horrific elements.
Furiosa is by far as important as Max is in the film. In many ways, it's her film, and Max is on for the ride.
Throughout the film, Furiosa grapples with her past decisions and the loss of her home, the Green Place. Her journey is not only physical but emotional, as she pursues redemption and salvation, and the relationship she forms with Max is built on mutual respect and shared resilience.
Where are the others?
What others? We're the only ones left.
Charlize Theron's Imperator Furiosa is perhaps the film's standout performance. Theron brings a fierce determination to Furiosa, embodying strength, resolve, and deep-seated compassion. And her portrayal of Furiosa's physicality is compelling, driving much of the film's emotional narrative.
He was so excited about creating an anti-heroic woman who was really driven by these very, very pure human flaws.
The paradox here is a very strong woman, statuesque more than just physically in her persona and her spirit. And at the same time, you recognize the vulnerability. It's not just a mask. The two things are there.
This idea that she's kind of saving these women, to me, just didn't feel as interesting as they belong to a man who hurt her incredibly, and she's just had enough. And she's gonna take these women with her, and she's gonna take what matters to him the most. So it really is the ultimate story of revenge.
Immortan Joe is the tyrannical ruler of the Citadel, exploiting the desperation of the masses to maintain power. His character embodies the grotesque consequences of absolute power, using both physical and psychological means to control his followers. Joe's pursuit of Furiosa and the wives is driven by a possessive need to control his legacy, but it also exposes his vulnerabilities, showing him as a dependent tyrant who cannot sustain his rule through sheer intimidation alone. Hugh Keys-Byrne, reprising a villainous role in the Mad Max universe, having previously played Toe Cutter in the original film, brings a terrifying presence to Immortan Joe.
As the Immortan, I am seeing myself as somebody who is here to raise us all up, to make things better, to give these kids more of a life by giving them blood from other people that I've caught and a breeding program that's going to actually improve us, that there's going to be vegetables and all of these things. And we love cars, V8s, that's the answer, the big V8. Let's lash another one to another one. Let's keep all this going because this is going to keep us moving, this is going to keep us on top. And that's what dictators do, isn't it?
His portrayal is both menacing and pathetic, encapsulating the brutal, decrepit dictator with a chilling effectiveness.
Look, if you know Hugh, he's such a wonderful guy. He just says, okay, I'm up for it. I mean, he's an amazing guy. He came down to Australia, and on Mad Max, I knew nothing about acting. When I made the first Mad Max, I'd never really been on a film set before. But he kind of created a gang of bikers.
Yeah.
And they rode around the city and literally wore their costumes and became a bikie gang. That bikie gang was the sort of heart of the movie. And he dies, again, at the end of the movie, the toe cutter. And all these years later, I thought, we need someone like that who's got the authority. And he became the warlord, you know. I mean, very playful, but he'd walk onto the set and not only the war boys and the stunt crew, but some of the crew would go, you know, Immortan Joe. They'd give the sign of the V8.
You look amazing! You look amazing!
And he demanded, he said, everybody, you know, he'd say, Daddy's here, and he'd walk on in his full costume and stuff. And it just gave it that sort of extra power.
Portrayed by Nicholas Hoult, Nux provides a poignant glimpse into the indoctrination of the war boys. Initially eager to die a glorious death in service to Immortan Joe, his journey is a transformative arc of redemption.
High-octane crazy blood filling me up!
His initial failure to capture Max and the subsequent interactions with Capable humanize him and allow him to see beyond the cultish devotion to Joe.
Witness me.
His sacrifice at the end of the film is a powerful redemption, portraying his complete transformation from a blind follower into a hero in his own right.
You know, these characters are very intense and full on, but they have the utmost belief in things and commitment. So I think, you know, when you've got a brilliant director like George, you want to commit to his vision and whatever he needs you to do. So it kind of, the character and what I also wanted to do on set were very similar in some ways.
Okay.
But plus, you know, Nick's a great actor. I mean, even though you're still a baby.
Even though no one knows it yet.
No one knows it. But no, when Nick, I told you it took a long time to do it. Nick came in when he was barely 19, and we gave him an incredibly difficult scene to do. And I watched it, I was blown away. The moment that happened, you know, that was Nux.
Nicholas Hoult delivers a transformative and deeply affecting performance as Nux, who undergoes one of the most significant character arcs in the film. Hoult's portrayal of Nux's journey, from a brainwashed zealot to a character of surprising depth and humanity, is handled with both sensitivity and conviction. His evolution is heartrending and beautifully realized, adding a crucial human element to the film's exploration of redemption and change.
Barry, if they don't get me, then the night viewers will.
Fury Road demonstrates that even in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, human connections and growth are not only possible, but essential, providing the emotional core that makes the film resonate deeply.
So he's a kind of a good man running away from himself. And that's interesting, quite different from the Furiosa character, who basically is driven by some sort of obligation to promise to her mother to find her way home. Despite all her Herculean efforts, can't do it and becomes something else. And then decides redemption's not for her, but it's for others. as she says, less corrupted, and that's the wives. They're very interesting characters to me because they're very, very sort of classic characters that are timeless in a way. And I mean, these stories are allegories, and that's one of the big attractions for me to work on those films.
The plot is elegantly simple, yet richly layered. The central narrative, Furiosa's attempt to escape Immortan Joe with his captive wives and seek refuge in the mythical Green Place, serves as a canvas for exploring themes of survival, tyranny, and redemption.
Once you're in that vehicle with those Furiosa and Max girls, they're just going somewhere. There's not a lot of talking about stuff. It's almost a silent movie.
Basically, it all happens without words. They speak only when it's necessary. Furiosa is very pragmatic with the language.
Now pick up what you can and run.
Max is very laconic.
You can get in.
There is no luxury for words, but I think all of us struggled with it in the beginning. You doubt that you can get something across without the use of words. And it's good to sometimes be forced into a direction where you're out of your comfort zone.
So you need to have people around you that can show you a weight and depth and a breadth of emotion and understanding and change with very little dialogue. And that's why casting was absolutely key, you know, and Charlize, she nails it, as she always does, you know?
The script cleverly uses the relentless chase not just for action sequences, but as a moving stage for character interaction and growth. The journey through the wasteland is packed with obstacles that not only provide breathtaking action, but also challenge the characters, forcing them to evolve and reveal their true selves. Fury Road is a triumph in action filmmaking, blending groundbreaking visual aesthetics and practical stunts with deeply human storytelling.
What do you think is the best movie you've seen in 2015?
It'd have to be the Mad Max movie, Fury Road. I got a print of Mad Max on 35mm, and I watched it in my house, and I had it all weekend, and I ended up watching it 3 different times. And I resisted seeing it for a while, because I was like, Mad Max? Without Mel Gibson? Forget that. Then I saw the movie, and okay, it's terrific. And he's pretty good in it, I have to admit, he's pretty good.
The film's accolades were capped by a substantial haul at the Academy Awards, where it won 6 Oscars, all in technical categories, celebrating its achievements in editing, production design, costume design, makeup, sound mixing, and sound editing. These honors underscore the technical mastery that went into creating the film's immersive post-apocalyptic world.
It took about 10 years before Mad Max 1 and Mad Max 2, I realized, this movie did mean something to people.
Finally, we finished Fury Road, so I can die happy. George Miller is a true genius. He's a magician.
There's a lot of lovely reviews coming back from around the world.
He's pulled it off. End of story.
The fact that right up to the Academy Awards that people seem to be responding to what we'd done.
The script is an achievement in show-don't-tell writing, providing a blueprint for how action films can convey complex stories and character arcs without sacrificing pace or thrill. It's not just a revival of the classic franchise, but a reinvention.
Why do we make stories? What would the world be like without stories, and why make this story?
There would be no world without story. Even if a person standing still takes one step, there's a beginning, middle, and end of that story. But the key to it is that it needs an audience, it needs an observer. There is no story without somebody to observe it. So, and that applies to everything. And so story is something that is deeply ingrained in us as individuals and as a collective.
Too far.
Furiosa! They took Furiosa!
Furiosa. Give me this promise. Promise me you'll find your way home.
She's from a place of abundance.
My childhood. My mother. I want them back. I want them back!
The question is, do you have it in you to make it epic?
Set a few decades before Fury Road, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, throws us back into a post-apocalyptic Australia, as bleak and desperate than ever. Our protagonist, Furiosa, embarks on a grueling journey from captivity under the tyrannical Dementus to becoming a mechanical savant and warrior within the anarchic ranks of the Citadel.
In this film, you will see Furiosa being stolen as a child, which is something that we know in the mythology. However, you see everything that has caused her to become the person that you all now know. And that journey is wild and epic.
There was a burning sort of rage within Furiosa that Anya felt so strongly about.
And there's a real vulnerability in her strength, and there's a real strength in her vulnerability. And what I've seen of it is heartbreaking, and I think that's everything you could ask of that journey.
There's something resolute, highly determined, and ultimately ferocious.
The script ambitiously navigates her transformation, intertwining her thirst for vengeance with her quest for liberation. However, while it features breathtaking visuals and heart-pounding action sequences, it occasionally skids off the track, lacking the narrative tightness of Fury Road. Though Anya Taylor Joy's portrayal of the iconic Furiosa is pretty solid, the film's pacing and plot density tend to get in the way. Amid the roaring engines and clouded dust, a significant point of contention is the notable absence of Mad Max himself. The film's title, bearing Mad Max while only focusing on Furiosa, highlights a bait-and-switch tactic, seemingly used to cash in on the franchise's name without truly honoring its legacy. It might explain why Furiosa is currently struggling at the box office. Moreover, there's a nostalgic yearning in the air for what could have been, a return of Mel Gibson in his fourth film in the original continuity. The thrill of seeing Gibson stepping back into the boots of Max could have rekindled the raw, chaotic spirit of the early films, providing a direct lineage to the franchise's roots.
Cut the crap. On the best chance you've got.
The script crafts a landscape that is both vast in its desolation and intimate in its portrayal of Furiosa's struggle. But does it deliver a coherent trajectory that propels her from a silent survivor to a roaring rebel? Or does it get lost in the dust storms of its own ambition? Let's find out as we break down and review the film, examining whether Furiosa and Mad Max Saga is a well-oiled machine of cinematic storytelling or just another rusty relic riding the Fury Road.
So, of course, there's action in Furiosa. There's a lot of it, and it's different. And I think if it just repeats what we did in Fury Road, then I think it'll be seen as a cynical exercise. Every time you see something basically repeating what was successful in the past, it more or less, people become anesthetized to it.
In a post-apocalyptic Australia, a tribe known as the Vuvlini of the Many Mothers prosper in a hidden oasis. Among them is the young Furiosa and her friend Valkyrie, who encounter a gang of marauders slaughtering a horse in their oasis. To protect the place's secrecy, Furiosa instructs Valkyrie to conceal herself while she attempts to sabotage the gang's motorcycles. However, her efforts lead to her capture, forcing her to signal for help. Her mother Mary, along with a friend, retaliate by pursuing the marauders, successfully eliminating some but failing to rescue her. With her mother in hot pursuit, the surviving gang member reaches his camp, led by the vicious Dementus. But before he can reveal the location of the oasis, Furiosa mortally wounds him.
Dementus, look what I found.
Who do we have here?
She's from a place of abundance.
What's your name?
Tomorrow, I'll follow the tracks that brought you here and I'll take you home.
Pretending to empathize with the girl, Dementus promises to return her home the following day. Amidst a raging sandstorm, Mary infiltrates the camp, kills the guards and escapes with their daughter, but their freedom is short-lived as Dementus, using his bloodhounds, recaptures them. In a brutal display, he tortures Mary to extract the location of their home, yet Mary endures the ordeal without divulging the secret, and ultimately dies.
Ah, she's your mother. Perfect.
Whatever you have to do, however long it takes, promise me you'll find your way home. Plant this seed. Protect the green place.
Give me this one gift. Promise.
Following her mother's death, Furiosa becomes mute for years, clinging only to a peach seed from her home as a solemn reminder of her past. Enduring her captivity under Dementus, who disturbingly calls her his daughter, she witnesses the brutal expansion of his gang. In a harrowing display of power, Dementus and his cohorts force a smaller gang to assimilate under cruel conditions. The initiation involves chaining the leader of the group to 5 motorcycles, compelling the remaining members to fight each other for a place on the bikes.
Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. Who's got the goods, the bollocks, the testes to ride with Dementus?
The narrative then takes a turn when the gang encounters a brain-damaged warboy from the Citadel, lost and wounded. He inadvertently reveals the location of his home, which features abundant water and food, and fueled by the information, Dementus leads his gang to the Citadel.
He pumps it up from deep in the earth, calls it Aquacola, and claims it all for himself.
The fortress stands as a formidable stronghold. Originally an aquifer guarded by heavily armed men, it was seized and transformed by Colonel Joseph Immortan Joe Moore, a decorated war hero turned despotic ruler. Under his command, it was reconstructed into the Citadel, a trio of towering rock formations that dominate the skyline and serve as the epicenter of his religious cult. It is ingeniously engineered to harness the natural aquifer below, providing precious fresh water which is funneled to irrigate vegetation. This engineering feat enabled the cultivation of a small but vital green area in an otherwise barren world, making it a critical resource hub. The structure of the Citadel is divided into 3 main towers, each with a distinct purpose. Tower 1 serves as Immortan Joe's headquarters. It houses hydroponic gardens and water control systems. At its apex is the Biodome, a lavishly appointed sanctuary where his wives are hidden. But the tower is not just a residence, but a repository of pre-war knowledge, housing a library, musical instruments, and other educational resources. It effectively symbolizes the opulence and control at the heart of Joe's power. Tower 2, on the other hand, is occupied by the middle class, skilled individuals like mechanics and medics who form the backbone of its functional society. It also contains a blood bank, where captives are used as blood supplies for the war boys. Tower 3 is the abode of the working class. Promised a better life, they're instead exploited as slave labor, most notably as mill rats powering the massive elevator platform. This makes the Citadel nearly impregnable, with access controlled via the single, laboriously operated platform. Their existence starkly contrasts with the relative luxury of the upper towers, highlighting the rigid social stratification within the Citadel. In contrast, the ordinary populace live in squalor at the base of the towers. Known as the Wretched, they are dependent on Joe's whims for water, which he dramatically dispenses from a skull-faced balcony to reinforce his godlike status among the people. Upon arrival, Dementus attempts to incite a rebellion against Immortan Joe. However, Joe, alongside his advisor, the People Eater, and his sons Rictus and Scrotus, remains unfazed.
All of you, bring me your leaders and throw them down. You will rule with me in the splendor of a new wasteland.
They strategically respond with explosives and use cranes to seize many of the gang's vehicles, forcing him to retreat. Despite the setback, though, Dementus continues to monitor the place, and soon learns of its trading practices, where food and water are exchanged for gas from nearby Gastown and bullets from the bullet farm.
Send off my war rig to bring back gasoline.
Gastown stands on a flat plain surrounding an abandoned refinery to the south. The harsh environmental conditions necessitate the use of masks by its inhabitants to avoid inhaling toxic fumes. The flat landscape also requires elevated vantage points, leading to the utilization of 40-foot-high poles on cars. These are not only used for surveillance, but also serve a critical role in road wars. On the other hand, initially an abandoned lead mine located west of the Citadel, the bullet farm was transformed into a crucial arms factory. It now produced weapons, gunpowder, and ammunition, essential for the ongoing war against the roving gangs of the wasteland. And structurally, it's akin to a quarry set within a vast crater, featuring a spiraling dirt road that descends into the central basin. It was bestowed upon the bullet farmer by Immortan Joe as a reward for his role in ousting the original inhabitants of the Citadel. As its overseer, the bullet farmer acts as guardian, judge, and executioner. Capitalizing on this intelligence, Dementus orchestrates a bold move by capturing one of the war rigs en route to Gastown. Using it, he infiltrates Gastown with his warriors, who then seize control and open the gates for him to take command. In his new position of power, he opens negotiations with Immortan Joe, leveraging a remote detonator that threatens to destroy Gastown if Joe retaliated. Immortan then proposes a deal to increase the resources sent to Gastown in exchange for Furiosa, whom he valued as a potential breeder due to the scarcity of healthy women, and for the organic mechanic, a man with crucial medical expertise.
Take this girl, otherwise it's war. Deal.
Despite initially refusing to part with Furiosa, Dementus is forced to agree when Furiosa intervenes, declaring her independence and expressing her desire to join Immortan Joe. However, once inside the Citadel, Furiosa finds an opportunity to escape. Disguising herself as a boy, she begins to engage in the construction of new vehicles and a more formidable war rig, thereby cementing her place within the intricate societal and mechanical framework. Years later, she's matured into a young adult and distinguished herself as a highly respected crew member thanks to her mechanical prowess. Despite her achievements, she maintains the facade of being mute and secretly plans her escape to return to her homeland. At the same time, Praetorian Jack recognizes Immortan Joe's most skilled driver, who has never lost a war rig during a transport mission, sets off for his latest journey to Gastown and the Bullet Farm, and taking this opportunity, Furiosa attaches herself to the undercarriage of the war rig. Tragically, their journey is abruptly disrupted when a rogue gang, former members of Dementus and exiles from Gastown, launch an aggressive assault. They deploy various flying vehicles and gliders, resulting in a fierce skirmish where Furiosa and Jack emerge as the sole survivors. In the aftermath, she attempts to seize control of the war rig, only for Jack to stop her. Recognizing her talents and potential, Jack instead proposes that she become his apprentice, offering to teach her all he knew about vehicle operation and combat tactics.
Where did you think you were going?
If you survive everything we take on together, you'll have all the skills you need to get wherever you want to go. Keep it. You'll need it.
He explains that this would enable her to eventually make a well-planned escape, and realizing the benefit of his offer, she agrees. As time passes, Furiosa ascends to the rank of Praetorian and becomes Jack's second-in-command, with their professional relationship deepening into love. Eventually, Jack expresses his belief that Furiosa is prepared to seek her freedom, and reveals that his support is rooted in his parents' belief in fighting for a cause, a principle he feels he would embody by helping her escape. He then proposes joining in her fight for freedom, and moved by his commitment, Furiosa accepts. During a mission to the Bullet Farm, they learn that Gastown is unraveling under the poor leadership of Dementus. Urged by the Bullet Farmer, who proposes they capitalize on the turmoil, Furiosa and Jack head to Gastown. But upon arrival, they find the community in disarray and on the verge of collapse, with widespread starvation despite ongoing food shipments. Amidst the chaos, Dementus seeks a meeting with Joe and the Bullet Farmer to discuss stabilizing Gastown, but instead provokes a riot. Luckily, Furiosa and Jack narrowly escape with their lives. Back at the Citadel, they relay the dire situation to Joe, who convenes a meeting with his council. After deliberating, they resolve to confront Dementus and gather all available ammunition from the Bullet Farm.
This place, at the end of your map of secrets. I want to help you find it.
Seizing this mission as their opportunity, Furiosa and Jack plan their escape, hoping to leverage the chaos for their own liberation. But the situation escalates rapidly when Dementus, anticipating an offensive, launches a preemptive strike. He takes advantage of the Bullet Farmer's absence to overtake the farm, swiftly overpowering the war boys. Jack then finds himself trapped inside, and although he urges her to leave, Furiosa chooses to enter the dangerous Bullet Farm to help him. Together, they orchestrate a daring and miraculous escape. However, their bold defiance triggers a fierce pursuit by Dementus and his forces, leading to their eventual capture.
Where are you going? So full of hope. There is no hope.
Failing to recognize her, Dementus decides to exact a brutal punishment. He chains Furiosa by her injured arm and executes Jack, who is dragged to death by a motorcycle and devoured by bloodhounds. During this gruesome spectacle, driven by desperation and resolve, Furiosa manages to sever her arm, sabotage his vehicle, and make a harrowing escape. Her journey back to the Citadel, hinted to be aided by Mad Max, who's seen observing her from afar, is fraught with hardship, and upon her return, she reports the harrowing events to Immortan Joe. Resolute and fueled by deep-seated desire for vengeance, Furiosa vows to personally eliminate Dementus, setting the stage for a dramatic and personal confrontation.
Gentlemen, it's time! Time to take back what's rightfully ours! And Furiosa! Furiosa!
If you find him, he's mine.
A 40-day war breaks out under the leadership of Scrotus, depicted through a rapid montage narrated by the History Man. By the end, the biker horde has been nearly annihilated, leaving only a few survivors, including Dementus and a handful of his followers. Jumping into the conflict, Furiosa equips herself with a mechanical arm and pursues the fleeing Dementus, methodically eliminating its allies.
There will always be war, but to get home, Furiosa fought the world.
Eventually, he's left alone, the last man standing of his once formidable gang, and in the morning, he awakens to find his canteen slashed, his motorcycle wrecked, and his ammunition depleted. When Furiosa confronts him, Dementus recognizes her and, paradoxically, expresses joy at being reunited with his daughter, suggesting she will inherit his legacy of vengeance.
Remember me?
You fabulous thing. You crawled out of a pitiless grave deeper than hell. Only one thing's gonna do that for you. Not hope. Hate.
My mother. My childhood. I want them back. I want them back!
The question is, do you have it in you to make it epic?
The narrator then presents several potential conclusions to this tale. In one, Furiosa executes him with a gunshot. Another has her subjecting him to the same torture he inflicted on Mary and Jack. However, the one Furiosa claims to be true diverges significantly. She brings him back to the Citadel, where she plants the seed inside of him, resulting in a peach tree burgeoning from his body, symbolizing new life from his death. The film then ends with Furiosa using the war rig to smuggle Immortan Joe's wives away from the Citadel, connecting to the events of Mad Max Fury Road. In Furiosa and Mad Max Saga, character development is a mixed bag. While Furiosa is given a clear arc, the rapid pace at which her development is handled, along with the underutilization of other characters, prevents the film from fully engaging on an emotional level. Effective character development requires time and careful construction of motivations, backstories, and interpersonal relationships, elements that are crucial to truly connect with and care about the characters' journeys. And while it delivers amazing action and spectacle, it doesn't consistently support these with strong character growth, making the narrative sometimes feel hollow. The central character, Furiosa, is portrayed with complexity and vigor by Anya Taylor Joy.
On the simplest level, it's about someone who's taken from home as a child, makes a promise to return whatever it takes to get home. It's basically the odyssey of one character who undergoes a number of trials, accumulating the skills which are going to get her to fulfill her objective, which is to get home, having promised her mother, no matter how long it takes, whatever you have to do, promise me you'll find your way home. We see her become the Furiosa we meet in Fury Road. All the good and the bad, all the complexity I hope, is revealed in this story.
I feel so lucky that I fell in love with this character through Charlize's interpretation. Fury Road blew my mind in such a huge way. And I think for both Chris and I, we never thought we'd have the opportunity to play in this sandbox. So when the opportunity came, I'm just so grateful for the work that they did on that movie. And it's still one of my favorite movies of all time. My hope in this film for young women is that they realize that you are stronger than you think you are. You have more power than you think you have. And you can do a lot with that. It's just consistent pressure, but we're gonna get there. Just come on this ride with us. You will not be disappointed.
From the onset, she's established as a spirited survivor, with a deep-seated yearning for freedom, and we witness a revolution from a captive in a brutal regime to a resilient leader. But the script sometimes rushes her development, pushing her too quickly into roles of competence and leadership, without fully exploring the internal struggles that would naturally accompany such a transformation. Taylor Joy takes on the formidable task of stepping into the role previously held by Charlize Theron. She brings a nuanced intensity to Furiosa, effectively capturing her resilience and determination, and her performance is both fierce and emotionally resonant, embodying Furiosa's transformation from a silent captive to a rebel leader.
What was it about Anya Taylor Joy that made you think that she was the person for that role?
Well, at first I thought there wasn't anybody, and then Edgar Wright showed me an early cut of the film last night in Soho, in which Anya appeared, and I saw her, and there's some timeless, resolute, powerful quality to her. And I asked Edgar about it. He didn't know what I was thinking of Furiosa, but he says, if you want to cast her, you must do it. She's great, she's got it all, do it. I subsequently learned why. She started at a young age, off her own bat, the youngest of several children. I think she rode motorbikes when she was a kid. You know, she studied ballet, has all that sort of discipline. And it just proved to be the case that she could take this stuff on with the precision and the intensity that was required.
I was really excited by the physical nature of this job. I wanted to do as much as I was allowed to do, and George was really supportive of that. So I started training a year before we started filming the movie.
There's no question that Anya brought something that's ferocious to the movie. I mean, whether it's in her or not, she found that in herself. And it's something that I sensed in her work previous to working with her, and it's something I really got to know in working with her on this movie.
Anya brought such an intelligence to it, such a depth, such a passion and intensity. There was a burning sort of rage within Furiosa that Anya felt so strongly about.
Her journey, her commitment to it, and her absolute refusal to go down is something that we can all learn from.
One of my favorite characters is Praetorian Jack, who serves as both a mentor and ally to Furiosa. But while his character is crucial for her journey, his own development is sidelined. His motivations are briefly touched upon, his respect for his parents' principles of fighting for a cause, but this felt more like a narrative convenience than a fully fleshed out impetus. The relationship between Jack and Furiosa, evolving into a romantic subplot, is also intended to add emotional stakes but feels forced, lacking the gradual build-up that would make their connection feel genuine. Still, Tom Burke effectively offers a blend of ruggedness and sensitivity to the role.
Very similar thing happened with Tom Burke. We had Anya and Chris, and I remember Nikki Barrett, the casting agent, made a list. I think there are about 20 people on the list, as people do, and I think Tom's name was third or fourth on that list. And the moment I saw it, never thought of it, but the moment I saw Nikki's suggestion, I didn't read the rest of the name. I just knew, because I'd seen, I was struck, and I thought, God, this guy is just, there's just something about him. Something about who they are, the characters are theoretically in your mind, and the presence, that immediate sort of first impression that you get in, and then it's just a question of confirming that impression and reinforcing it.
Praetorian Jack, his whole life really is within the Citadel and the world of the Citadel, and he meets Furiosa and he immediately recognizes some spark of an original individual in her. Not even a spark, the embodiment of that. And she has this whole idea about somewhere she's going to go, and he initially refers to that as a mirage. When they're making this deal, this pact, he says, you know, in a few years' time we're free to chase mirages. In the arc of their relationship, he comes to have a kind of faith in this place that she's heading to, and a wish to help her find it.
You know, this is what I mean, until I saw the film and until people who saw the film came back and, like you said, he reminds them of Max, it never didn't occur to me.
Oh, really?
But the moment it was said, I thought, of course he is. Yeah. Very, very, very similar. Their Venn diagram overlaps a little bit, but again, it just arose out of the work.
He delivers a solid performance, infusing a sense of gravitas into his scenes and providing a strong sense of mentorship and eventual partnership to Furiosa. And his chemistry with Anya Taylor Joy is palpable, although the script limits the emotional depth of their relationship.
For most Australian actors, it's sort of the pinnacle or a dream of sorts, to be working in a Mad Max film, George Miller film. I heard David Collins say, the Americans have Star Wars, the Brits have Harry Potter, and we have Mad Max. Yeah. And, 45 years this franchise has existed. I watched the films with my parents growing up, and as an Australian actor, it was kind of the pinnacle to work with George Miller, but also in a Mad Max film. So it's, pretty wild, kind of pinch yourself moment.
Once I met Chris and saw his response and understood what he was thinking and the way that dovetailed, I thought, okay, he's the one who should take on Dementus.
By the time we started shooting, I'd had this script in my lap for 2 years. And about 2 weeks out, I really felt exactly what you were saying, which is I don't quite know where I want to head with this. But there was this sort of conflict, and George suggested, journaling and writing in character, which I hadn't done before. And I was really surprised about sort of what had come out. And I showed it to George, and I think what we both connected with was who he was prior to where we see him in the film, and what experiences birthed this individual, and what kind of suffering had he endured that had transformed him emotionally and physically. I think that was what was really nice, and this was interesting. I was trying to tap in. This is going to sound weird because I play a murderous psychopath, but he's trying to tap into the sort of adventurous, the joy, playfulness as a kid when your imagination's allowed to sort of run wild, and that was easier to access with a character that was allowed to break the rules, and so there was one big sort of experiment, and luckily had George there to say, too far, bring it this way, bring it this way. It was allowing there to be ambiguity and questions raised or offered up to spur conversation from an audience. And anytime, I kind of was like, we should articulate and say that, George is like, no, it's the less is more, little hints of it, and let people discover that and interpret it themselves. And that was a wonderful lesson in working with George, was just about, when and where and how much to offer up as far as ideas go and representations of ideas and characters.
The antagonist, Dementus, is a character filled with potential that the script only partially taps into. While he is menacing and formidable, he's portrayed primarily through his obsession with power and control, missing chances to explore his hinted backstory or motivations beyond surface-level tyranny.
It's a sort of messiah quality. He decides that, okay, this is the next step to take over and rule the wasteland.
Who do we have here?
Dementus falls into the pattern of the Romans, the Great Khan, Hannibal, who maraud across vast land. Once I met Chris, I was really struck by how acute his observations were.
We had many, many discussions prior to shooting about who this guy once was. He's a product of the wasteland. I think everyone there has suffered to such an extent. You can't not be hardened and warped.
I've never seen him so focused. He never left set.
He was always interacting with his biker gang. We talked about charisma, and he said these leaders, they're very engaging. They have a playfulness that can draw you in.
Chris Hemsworth depicts the antagonist with a menacing physical presence and charismatic villainy. His portrayal is commanding, and he effectively channels the brutal nature of his character. However, there isn't much room for Hemsworth to explore the complexities or the potential vulnerability of Dementus. Despite this, his performance is engaging, entertaining, and intimidating, adding a necessary tension to the film.
Mahiro Maeda, a great Japanese anime artist, he did some concept art, and he drew Dementus, and he had a teddy bear. And that grew into the narrative of the teddy bear. And he refers to the teddy bear belonging to his own children.
Yeah. And I guess the relationship between Furiosa and Dementus, from Dementus's point of view, is somewhat paternal, and he sees himself as someone who has watched over her and taken care of her. Quite the opposite from Furiosa's point of view, and so very convoluted relationship that for me stemmed from his own sort of insanity. He's also a product of the wasteland. He also is a individual that has learnt that life is cheap and survival by any means possible, rule with an iron fist, kill or be killed. It's a dangerous space they all find themselves in, and interesting to see what different characters and personalities are birthed from that pretty violent existence.
Both Immortan Joe and the Bullet Farmer are reintroduced, serving as peripheral yet pivotal characters. They are mainly used to set up the political and social structure of the wasteland. However, their characters are not developed beyond their functional roles in the plot. This results in another missed opportunity to deepen the political intrigue and personal dynamics of the wasteland, which could have enriched the narrative. Still, Lucky Hume brings a seasoned malevolence and strategic cunning to a younger Immortan Joe. His portrayal captures the tyrannical control Joe exerts over the Citadel with a chilling authenticity, and his presence is domineering, embodying the brutal leader with a mix of cold calculation and ruthless intent.
He was there before, like the history man, and he says, for him, initially he was Colonel Joe Moore, and then he gets out into the wasteland. He becomes this sort of a deified in some way, or at least uses some sort of religious belief to become what's him. But again, if the hero is the agent of change, and it's often said, yesterday's hero becomes today's tyrant. They become so holdfast, as Joseph Campbell said. They hold on, they love what they built so much that they become rigid and whatever. And so someone else has to rise to break down those sort of orthodoxies. I mean, that's a constant pattern in history.
The supporting cast, including the War Boys, the gang members, and Furiosa's allies in the Citadel, are used more as plot devices than as characters with their own arcs or agency. They populate the world and contribute to the atmosphere and dynamics of the film, but are given little individual development. This lack of depth in the supporting characters made the world feel less immersive and the stakes less impactful. The plot, while ambitious, also often struggled under the weight of its own complexity. The story tries to weave together themes of vengeance, freedom, and survival, but these can feel disjointed at times. Plot points like Furiosa's eventual rebellion and the siege on Gastown are executed with a sense of inevitability rather than surprise, which sap the tension from scenes that should be brimming with suspense. Dialogue also ranges from poignantly sharp to frustratingly on the nose. Moments of subtle character interaction are overshadowed by expository lumps that feel like they're ticking boxes rather than serving the story.
And I remember talking to George when we first started shooting, and he said, look, it's going to feel familiar to people, but you have to do something different. And I think there is would you say, almost a Shakespearean tone to this. There's more dialogue. It spans across a greater amount of time, I think 15 years, whereas the last film
It's like a rock and roll, opera.
Yeah. I think it is exhilarating and intense and furious, but there's a depth to it and a detail which is unique again to the rest of the Mad Max franchise.
In a world where there's no rule of law, any rules but to survive, what do you become? What's left of you having gone through all of this? And how you deal with the world? That's the essential dynamic in this story. The essence of the human being is revealed, and that's the essential story which I would like to think the audience takes from it.
As for pacing, the film alternates between high-speed chases and slow, almost stagnant sequences of dialogue, resulting in a choppy rhythm that can disengage viewers just as quickly as it reeled them in. With all of that said, Anya Taylor Joy's Furiosa is compelling, depicted with a rich backstory and a steely resolve. But like I said, sometimes her journey feels rushed, as if the film is too eager to place her in action sequences rather than letting her character breathe and evolve organically. And ultimately, the supporting characters often feel like mere plot devices, designed to propel Furiosa's story forward rather than fully realized individuals.
But one thing I wanted to ask is, am I thinking that you wrote Furiosa before Fury Road? Is that correct?
No, we wrote Fury Road first. But in order to inform Fury Road, we started to write the backstories of Furiosa and Max. And that, because the film kept getting delayed, Furiosa ended up as a screenplay. So by the time we started actually for real, we were able to give that to the cast and crew. And when she read it, probably about 6 months before, read Furiosa, she said, "Can we shoot this one first?" And I said, "Nobody's been planning this other film." No, we couldn't, of course. And what was interesting to me is that it was it wasn't a repetition of Fury Road.
While it's visually stunning and bold in its narrative ambition, the film stumbles with uneven pacing and underdeveloped characters. In the end, it feels like a ride that has all the right parts but doesn't always run smoothly. I think that fans may find enough in the desolate beauty and frantic action to satisfy their thirst for the Mad Max universe. As a chapter in the beloved franchise, it struggles to match the high-octane storytelling prowess of the Road Warrior, leaving us yearning for the days of Max himself. It needed more fuel in the tank to truly make it across the wasteland it aimed to conquer, but it still had a lot of amazing sequences, and is a well-made action film with enough to like about it.
Basically, driven by curiosity, and the thing that sustains my curiosity is not only trying to figure out how to tell stories, but why we tell them. Right. I had no idea why the first Mad Max seemed to have a lot of resonance around the world until I read Joseph Campbell after the event. And then that led to Mad Max 2 and so on. And here I am still sort of doing it. I've always been interested in that power of myth, as Joseph Campbell, of stories, and how at any level, whether they're anecdotes between two people, your family stories about your local football team, your community, whether they're folklore, fairy tales, religious stories, all of those are basically timeless, and they are in all cultures. We're hardwired for them. And I'm so acutely aware of that sort of force in the world. And I feel particularly privileged to grow up in Australia, where we have the oldest continuous culture on the planet in the Indigenous Australian narratives, at least 65,000 years old. And the more I get to know them, the more remarkable they are. Fury Road was about 5 wives being taken away from the Immortan Joe. And it was only after Fury Road that I remember that one of the base stories in all the narratives, the so-called songlines of the nomadic indigenous culture that can go back all that time, was a story of 7 sisters escaping a malevolent male force. And I thought, wait a minute, this is a continuum.
These stories are so in our bones.
That's why cinema, despite all the prognostication that, cinema I think will stay, simply because we need that shared experience somehow. That's been the progression of stories throughout time. That's the thing that really blows me away, and I think, that's why I'm attracted to them so much.